We're here to listen to the public and not to ourselves. So with that, I want to first express a thanks to the school district for allowing us to use this facility, and Dominic, who's been the negotiator with the school district in terms of getting this at this time, which is a pretty favorable time. And also I'd like to thank Diane from our building department, who's been the recipient of 50,000 emails and has distributed them to us. We are in receipt of them, and we are reading them very carefully. So thank you all for your participation. It's really important coming into this meeting that everybody have a really good understanding of what we're doing here. This is not a Q&A session. This is not a complaint session. This is a public hearing on the draft of the environmental study for treetops. I've asked our counsel, Dominic Cordisco, to give you a complete overview of what the purpose of the planning board is with regard to the project and the roles of other agencies consistent with that. So with that, I'm going to give the mic over to Dominic, let him give you a brief, and I would strongly suggest taking notes because this applies across the board for all planning board activities. There's been, in reading most of the letters, some people just don't understand really what the role of the planning board is in regards to these types of projects. And the planning board is really, it should be called planning process, because this is a process and not an end-all be-all. And I think it's very important that everybody understand that. So what comes out of tonight will not be an end product. What comes out of tonight will be information that we will incorporate into our questions to Treetop before they complete their final EIS. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dominic. Take notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Planning Board has been reviewing this application since it was first filed with the town 2 years ago in January 2022. Everyone who's interested in this project, or any project, should know that all Planning Board meetings are open to the public. Documents are made available at Town Hall and online, and the meetings are also recorded and streamed online on both YouTube and Facebook. However, comments made on Facebook or elsewhere online are not part of the record of this project. All comments must be sent to the Planning Board for them to be considered by the board and made part of the official record of this proceeding. As the chairman mentioned, the Planning Board has to review every application that comes before it, regardless of public interest or controversy. They simply cannot say that a project is a bad idea and then not review it. There are standards and procedures that apply to all projects. So that said, any comments tonight questioning why we are here, why is this even being considered? The answer is that the Planning Board must consider this project because an application has been made, the same as if anyone within the town made an application to the Planning Board. Cornwall Logistics LLC, the applicant, submitted its application on January 25th, 2022. On February 7th, 2022, the Town of Cornwall Planning Board declared its intent to be lead agency for review of the project. A notice of intent was circulated to the involved agencies on February 24th, 2022. After receiving no objections, the Town of Cornwall Planning Board on April 4th, 2022 declared itself lead agency and determined that the project creates the potential for various the Planning Board adopted a positive declaration which requires the preparation of an environmental impact statement. A public scoping session was held on May 2nd, 2022. The final scope was adopted by the Town of Cornwall Planning Board on June 7th, 2022. After performing the studies and analyses required in the final scope, the applicant then submitted a proposed draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS, to the Planning Board in January 2023, which the Planning Board reviewed and required the applicant to revise several times. The Planning Board reviewed the proposed DEIS and various revised drafts at its February 6th, April 3rd, and August 7th, 2023 meetings, and it finally deemed the DEIS to be adequate for commencing public review at the Planning Board's November 6, 2023 meeting. Adequate for commencing public review. It's an important legal term of art. By accepting the DEIS, the planning board's role was to ensure that the DEIS at least covered the items that were laid out in the final scope and provide enough information so that the public can comment on the project and its potential impacts. The DEIS has been available online and at town halls since December 1st, 2023. State law requires that the public hearing be held no sooner than 15 days from the DEIS being made available to the public and no later than 60 days from that date. Tonight's public hearing is 48 days into that 60-day window and complies with those requirements. The Planning Board discussed the timing of the public hearing and meeting and decided not to hold the public hearing during the holidays or shortly after the new year in order to give all those interested time to review it. The acceptance of the DEIS means that enough information has been prepared by the applicant to allow for the public to consider and comment on the project. By accepting the DEIS, the Planning Board was not indicating that the project should be approved or is ready for approval, or that the Planning Board members agree with the applicant's analyses or conclusions. Based on public comments and comments from the Planning Board members and its consultants, additional analyses and revisions to the plans will, in all probability, be required. State law requires that the Planning Board, as lead agency, respond to all substantive comments in writing in the final EIS. Once that document's prepared and adopted by the Planning Board, it will also be made available to the public for its review. The Planning Board has 3 areas of jurisdiction over this project, and they are all relevant for tonight's public hearing. First, the Planning Board is lead agency for the environmental review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQR. That means that the Planning Board must identify the relevant areas of potential environmental impact, take a hard look at them, and require that measures are taken so that the adverse environmental impacts will be avoided or minimized to the maximum extent practicable. It is not the intention of SEQR that environmental factors be the sole consideration in decision-making. Rather, state law requires that a suitable balance of social, economic, and environmental factors are incorporated into the planning and decision-making process. This is part of the Planning Board's review. The Planning Board also has jurisdiction over the site plan, which relates to the layouts of the buildings and the development of the site. For the site plan, the board's role is to ensure that the layout of the development meets the requirements of the zoning code. Lastly, the Planning Board has jurisdiction over the special permit required for this project. There are 5 specific criteria that the Planning Board must consider for every special permit use. They are: 1, all proposed structures, equipment, and materials shall be readily accessible to fire and police protection. 2, the proposed use shall be of such location, size, and character that in general it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it's proposed to be situated, and will not be detrimental to the orderly development of adjacent properties in accordance with the zoning classification of such properties. 3, the location and size of such use, the nature and intensity of the operations involved or conducted in connection therewith. I'll try to speak closer. I have to pretend I'm Bing Crosby, right? Because that's what Bing Crosby did. He brought the microphone really up close. My apologies. So number 3 is the location and size of such use, the nature and intensity of operations involved in or conducted in connection therewith, its site layout, and in its relation to access streets shall be such that both pedestrian and vehicular traffic to and from the use and the assembly of persons in connection therewith will not be hazardous or inconvenient or incongruous with or in conflict with the normal traffic in the neighborhood. Number 4, the location and height of buildings, the location, nature, and height of walls and fences, and the nature and extent of landscaping on the site shall be such that the use will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings. And 5, the impact of the proposed use shall not engender avoidable impacts upon the environment of the site or adjacent lands, and any such impacts will be the minimum necessary to accommodate the proposed use. And further, there shall be the maximum preservation of unique ecological or environmental assets, particularly as such affect the value and viability of adjacent areas. The treetop site was previously the site of the proposed Cornwall Commons project, which consisted of 490 residential dwelling units, 490 homes, and a mix of commercial uses, including a 45,000 square foot retail shopping center, a 15,500 square foot restaurant, a 50,000 square foot office building, an 80-room hotel, and a 70-bed congregate care facility. The Cornwall Commons project was originally proposed in 1999 and went through an extensive review process, which included both a generic environmental impact statement and a supplemental environmental impact statement. Although the Cornwall Commons project received bulk subdivision approval that allowed the site to be divided into various parcels, that subdivision was never finalized, and the site plan was never approved at the request of the site owner and applicant at the time, and the Cornwall Commons project was never built. The Cornwall Commons project was allowed under the zoning that was created for the Cornwall Commons project, which was PRD, or Planned Residential Development. In 2019, the Cornwall Town Board amended the town's zoning code to remove the PRD zoning from this site. The remaining zoning left for this site allows for commercial and industrial uses, which were and have been the allowed uses that have been in place for this site since before the Cornwall Commons project was proposed in 1999. It is not correct to say that the 2019 proposed zoning amendment, which became law in 2020, changed the zoning of this site from residential to commercial and industrial. It had been both residential and commercial industrial. Now it is only commercial industrial along with the other uses that are allowed in the planned commercial zone. Presently, a majority of this site is within the planned commercial development zoning district, and a portion of the site along Route 9W is in the highway commercial zoning district. The Treetop project is proposed to be a planned industrial development, or PID, which is permitted by special permit only in the PCD zoning district. The PID is not permitted in the HC zoning district. The applicant has petitioned the Town of Cornwall Town Board for an amendment to the Town of Cornwall zoning map to remap the entire site PCD. The applicant has also requested a text amendment from the Town Board to allow a maximum height of 50 feet for the buildings in the PCD zoning district. The Town Board has yet to take any action on those requests. If the Town Board moves forward with considering those requests, it must, by law, hold a public hearing before making any decisions. However, to be clear, the applicant has also stated that this project is not entirely dependent on the Town Board moving forward with the applicant's rezoning request. A majority of the site is within the PCD district, where warehouses are allowed as a special permit use. The applicant has also stated that it could construct buildings that meet the town's existing height requirement of 40 feet, or the applicant could seek an area variance from the Town of Cornwall Zoning Board of Appeals. If the applicant chooses to request a variance, that application will require a public hearing before the town's Zoning Board of Appeals. Before the Planning Board turns to its consultants, I suggest to the board that you may wish to consider extending the written public comment period at this time. There have already been requests to the board to do so, and I expect that a number of speakers tonight will be asking for additional time. The minimum period by law is 10 days from the close of the public hearing. You may wish to set a longer date now rather than waiting until the end of the hearing.
Thank you, Dominic, and now you know why he's our attorney. Thank you, Dominic, very much. I will say that before you speak tonight, there's a 10-question quiz on what Dominic just said. If you pass, you can speak. I'm teasing. With Dominic's recommendation, however, I would like to suggest doubling the comment period. Anyone have a comment on that? I mean, board?
So as you know, I'm a big advocate for making sure that we've fully captured all public comment prior to taking any action. So I'd recommend, given the scale of this project, that we actually triple that length of time for a total of 30 days from now. That would be a total of 78 days from the time of submission of the DEIS. And so I'd ask for the consideration of the rest of the board in tripling that length.
Okay, with that, thank you, Led. And with that, are there any board members with a comment, John? First, I'd like to congratulate John, Hines, and where's Steve? Steve right over there, who were just renamed to the board. I believe it was last night, was it not? Last night. Very good. So congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Led 30 days from now would be Saturday, so I would suggest Friday, the 16th, close of business. But 29 days. Correct.
If I may, I would suggest that actually be 30 days from whenever the public hearing is
Closes.
closed. So if it's possible, we'll get through everything.
If we don't close it tonight.
But if you don't close it tonight, it would be 30 days from whenever the second night would be held.
Perfect. Dominic, can you just speak quickly about projects of this scale of, I know Montgomery had the Amazon warehouse. They might have had other warehouses as well. Goshen had Legoland. For projects of those scale, how long was the public comment written period open for after the DIS public hearing?
So the suggestion here tonight, if I understand it correctly, is to extend the written comment period on the DEIS for an additional 30 days from, for instance, from tonight, if the public hearing is closed tonight, and that would be a total of 78 days. For contrast, the Amazon warehouse in the town of Montgomery had a maximum period of 52 days for public comment from the point that the document became available to the point where the last written comments were accepted by the town.
So at this point, I guess I'll move that we extend the written comment for 30 days at the end of the, after the close of the public hearing.
I have a motion. I'll have a second. All in favor? There, the period is hereby extended. Good. Okay, with that, we'll move to, before we bring in the public for comment, I thought it in your best interest to get a brief overview. We have a sterling set of consultants in the engineering field, in the planning field, and in the traffic field. I've asked each to prepare a very brief summary of their view of the project so that you're a little bit more informed in terms of where we stand. Let me defer for 1 second. I've respectfully asked the board and the consultants since last December not to publicly comment on any of this. And a lot of them have been dragged through the mill, so to speak, if people read things on social commentary, not realizing that behind the scenes, there's been a lot of work and thousands of pages read. And a lot of them have been subject to a lot of criticism without having had an opportunity, and I have respect for my request, not to respond. So I'm going to ask each of them to just give you a very brief overview of their analysis of the project thus far, so at least the public has a general idea of where we stand. Okay, and with that, I'll ask maybe Kristen O'Donnell from Lankin Tully, who is our planning consultant. Kristen? I'll even pass you the microphone. Where is she?
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you for not calling me Leslie. All right, so thank you. I did have quite a few significant or substantive comments on the DEIS, and I won't bore you or anyone else with all of my comments. But I think overall, my opinion is that there are some disconnect between the analysis and the mitigations and the plans. And I'll kind of try to elaborate on that a bit with my comments. And that's the visual impact, for example, concludes that the views of the site from Knoll Crest Court are mitigated by a hefty landscape buffer and berm. When you look at the landscaping plan, there's almost no vegetation at all proposed between the properties on Knollcrest and the building. So I think that's one of those examples where the mitigations that are discussed they're not making it their way into the plans for us to actually see and to actually make sure that those mitigations are going to be implemented, which is very important, obviously. The plan proposes a significant reduction in parking. 1,726 parking spaces are required based on zoning. 716 parking spaces are proposed on the site. We don't have a lot of rationale for why that is or any real analysis as to what the applicant may need. Now, of course, we don't know because this DEIS is not a end user specific document, but so we don't know, or the applicant hasn't provided any information on how many parking spaces they may need based on anything. So I think that that's something they're going to need to get into. And even if they don't know the end user, they're still going to have to base it on either examples of other warehousing in the area or something, because this board is going to need something to act on there. And we're going to need more rationale. In fact, the zoning code does allow this board to reduce the overall parking for non-residential uses, but does allow this board to require that spaces are land banked or that there is at least land on the site for land banking should additional parking become necessary over the due course of the use of the site. And there's almost no space on this project site that's not wetland that could possibly be used to land bank. So I think that that's something that the applicant's going to need to think about. In terms of the noise analysis, I had a lot of comments on that as well. I think in the same vein where the mitigation is not making its way into the plans, the noise analysis concludes that there are no impacts on 9W because, well, no noise impacts at all because the traffic that is exiting the site does not double. That, of course, is looking at the peak time for traffic as they do in traffic studies, but there's no discussion of overnight traffic. Again, we might not know, but this DEIS needs to evaluate a worst case scenario. So they need to be looking at noise overnight because obviously the ambient noise on 9W is much lower. The ambient noise in the entire area is much lower overnight than it would be during peak traffic times on 9W. So that's something that needs to be evaluated more thoroughly. I'm summarizing. There are several noise mitigations also that the study recommends, including noise barrier walls, sound absorbent padding, parapet walls around HVAC. I think that those are all good recommendations from the noise study. None of them are reflected on the plan. So again, we want to make sure that the mitigations that are being recommended by their experts are finding their way into the plan so that they're being implemented. Again, there's blasting that's likely under this plan because of there's rock on the site. There's no real plan. There's no real mitigations for blasting noise. There's no safety protocols. There's no notification to the neighbors in terms of protocols. Those are all things that we'd like to see in the FEIS addressed. In terms of endangered species, this report concludes that there are no impacts to any endangered species, despite the fact that there are the types of trees that Indiana and long-eared bats typically do use as habitat. Those are identified on the site, and the studies don't reference any overnight hours that they were done. So I think that that's a little bit, I don't think it's fair to conclude that there are no impacts to endangered bat species if we don't do the studies when the bats are likely out, which is overnight hours. I also wanted to point out that we got a letter from PIPSI today. The town got a letter from PIPSI today. They had a lot of comments on the endangered species and, Palisades Interstate Park Commission. They had quite a few comments on the studies that were done on habitat and species on the site that the applicant is going to have to address. Bald eagles as well. The site, the DEIS concludes no impacts to bald eagles, despite the fact that there was an actual bald eagle sighting on the site when the biologist was out there. So that's going to need to be investigated further as well. 125.8 acres of clearing on this site, including 7,484 mature trees, greater than 8-inch DBH, that are proposed to be cleared. The applicant did propose a landscaping plan as a mitigation there. In my opinion, the landscaping plan that's provided has a ways to go to mitigate that number of trees. Also, the applicant, I'm sure, is aware, but is going to need to address the town has just adopted a new tree preservation law. So the applicant's going to need to be consistent with that law, providing the required tree plan and tree replacement plan, more importantly. So that's all going to need to be done in terms of FEIS. So I do have a lot of comments. I don't want to babble on about all of these things, but the applicant is going to need to address all of these in terms of species, in terms of noise. We had traffic not traffic comments, I would never fill here, but traffic comments about traffic noise, the location of the access road. There's a discrepancy between the number of jobs the applicant says may be generated on the site between the utility studies and the study on economics. So I think that that's a major discrepancy. In terms of project alternatives, I think that there is an alternative that the applicant has proposed that shows a 100-foot additional buffer between the project site, disturbance, and a lot of the neighbors. I think that that's something that needs to be evaluated much more closely. And I did see that comment reiterated in several of the public comments that I saw today, including from the Palisades Interstate Park Commission and Orange County Planning, which we also received late this afternoon. Finally, I want to talk about another comment that I saw in a lot of the public letters, which is no end user has been identified. And I did touch on that briefly. I think it's important to understand that, yes, we don't know what the end user is, and this DEIS has been done based on industry standards and kind of generic worst case scenario. But I also think it's important to understand that any eventual end user of this site will need to demonstrate to the town and to this board that they do not exceed any of the thresholds mentioned in here. So it's not the case that this board, in the event or eventually that this board could approve this type of project, that if an end user comes in a year later, if they were to exceed any of the impacts identified in this document, they would need to come back and redo this evaluation. They need to prove that they're consistent or do not exceed any of those thresholds. So I think that that's an extremely important point as well. So it's not something where the applicant is saying, we don't know the end user, and then in a few years, it'll just be a surprise to anyone here. So that's certainly not the case. And I think that the applicant will need to come back and confirm to this board that all of those, everything that they studied in this document is true, and none of those are exceeded down the road, no matter who it is that's occupying that space. I've talked enough.
Can everyone hear me? Thank you, Kristen. Now you know why it takes, when we go through a subdivision, we get the analysis, and we do get very, very professional opinions on a lot of the projects that we work on. With that, I'd ask for Sean Arnaud, our engineer from McGoey, Hauser, and Etzel. Right there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The review so far that our office has taken is kind of collected itself into three main categories that I just wanted to briefly discuss this evening. The first one is grading. The applicant is proposing 750,000 cubic yards of material at this point, they've estimated, to come off of the site, to be trucked off the site. Obviously, that's going to have a significant impact during construction to traffic, as our traffic engineers looking at not only during when the site is in use at the end of the project, but during construction as well. So that's been flagged for his use and analysis. With that, the DEIS states that the retaining walls are shown preliminary in nature and they're not set in stone at this point. Obviously, that'll have to be honed in and as the civil engineer continues their design of the site. Additionally, they state that they believe a lot of the soils on the site can be reused, but that's also a preliminary statement. They have prepared a geotechnical analysis of the soils on the site, so I just ask that they continue that analysis of the geotechnical report to determine if that material needs to be trucked off the site and add to that number of yards that's been estimated and number of trucks that will end up on the road during construction. The second main category that I had was stormwater. our office is reviewing the SWIP that's been prepared for the site. I reached out to the applicant to make them aware that the town board recently adopted stormwater regulations that are enhanced beyond the New York State DEC requirements. And I believe that those regulations are going to have a significant impact on the design and layout of the buildings, their size, and the roadway network. And the civil engineer will have to look into that aspect. Lastly, the utilities, the applicant is looking to hook up to the Village of Cornwall and Hudson water network and distribution, as well as hook up to the town sewer district number 1, which is conveyed to the Shore Road sewage treatment plant. Both of those connections, or I should say all 3 of those connections, because there's 2 for water, will require land acquisition at this point, which to my knowledge has not been addressed, which obviously could have a significant impact on timing as well as cost for the project. So I just look that the applicant investigate that a little further so that we can understand if the routes that have been chosen so far are viable. With that.
Thank you, Sean. And last but not least, I have Dr. Phil Greeley, highly recognized transportation consultant. And we have to send the mic down? Okay. For transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philip Greeley, Colliers Engineering and Design. I'm a professional engineer. My focus is on traffic transportation studies. We review and we also design projects. So we understand the details that go into the review. The Amazon warehouse in Montgomery was mentioned. We actually did the review for the town of Montgomery Planning Board for that project to make sure that mitigation measures were put in place and that the studies were all done adequately, accurately, and coordinated those with other agencies. So background, I have about 40 years of experience in preparation of traffic studies, design of improvements, and evaluations. Our focus here is to review the technical aspects in the traffic study. That includes looking at traffic volumes, traffic projections, traffic analyses, were the analyses done properly, are all the factors taken into account, review of accident data and analysis that was prepared, and also a review of the mitigation measures. The document does identify some mitigation measures already. Some of those need to be fine-tuned, some of those need to be expanded. So we provide the technical basis as part of our review to focus on areas that may not be addressed in enough detail or need additional design details, et cetera. A couple of things that I think the public should be aware of. In addition to our review, there will be reviews by Orange County DPW, Orange County Planning, New York State DOT is also reviewing this document. They have to issue permits for any of the improvements on the state highway system. In this particular case, and with other large projects, the DOT actually has their own special consultant reviewing this application. So you're having a lot of eyes looking at the traffic and transportation aspects. A couple initial items, there's some shortcomings in some of the mitigation measures we've identified that the applicant has to expand on, indicate to demonstrate the feasibility of such improvements, and also to make sure that, as Kristen had mentioned, there are not end users identified in this document. So there are certain industry standards that we have to follow in terms of traffic projections. There's different categories that we look at. We're requesting some additional analysis for more intense uses, occupancies, and then the studies that were contained in the DEIS will be expanded on and addressed in the FEIS. As Mr. Codesco indicated, all comments have to be addressed in the FEIS. Public comments, our technical comments, comments from DOT, comments from Orange County DPW, from in this case, traffic doesn't stay within the town. It extends into other municipalities. Input from those, including the city of Newburgh, town of New Windsor, any of those comments need to be addressed. So there's a long way in terms of process that has to be gone through. In terms of the end result, if this project or some form gets built, the projections that are in these documents is the basis, okay? So we recommend what's called a post-opening, post-construction monitoring. That's one of our recommendations, and that's typical that you would require the applicant to evaluate it to make sure that the traffic projections that were the basis of this document are not being exceeded. Number two is in terms of the improvements that are identified to make sure that they're feasible and that they mitigate the impacts. So for example, with truck traffic at certain intersections to be able to accommodate those movements, again, they have to demonstrate that. Some of that information is already in the documents. Some of it needs to be fine-tuned. One other area that I think is important to understand is that the applicant will be responsible for paying for, at his cost, any improvements that are required. That needs to be done. And in this particular project, as Sean had indicated, there will be construction activities here that will generate significant traffic. Our recommendation is that some of these, if not all of these improvements that are necessary, especially the localized improvements, be implemented and in place before those construction activities occur. So that's something that we're recommending to the board. And as we get further, our review is ongoing. There's a lot of material that has to be gone through. We've identified some of the shortcomings. There's, the applicant has done a very exhaustive study. We had reviewed that before the document was circulated. They've adjusted many of those items, but there's still a way to go. And we'll continue our diligent review and report back to the planning board. But I think tonight is to hear the public comments and to make sure that those also get addressed. Thank you.
I need someone to turn it on for me. I'm technologically very impaired. Thank you, Dr. Greeley. With that, I'd like to do one further step throughout the process of my having asked planning board members not to say anything, not to make any public comments. I've had one particular member itching to make comments because he's been discussing concerns with the project from the get-go. Those concerns focused around what Dr. Greeley was just speaking about. So with that, I'm just going to ask Dr. Len Klotsky, who doubles in his other job as a professor of civil engineering at West Point, and he's the dean's executive agent for design and construction at West Point. The gentleman knows what he's talking about. I'm going to ask Len to make very brief comments on some of his concerns related to the transportation issue, since we haven't read a great deal about it on social media, et cetera. So Len, with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So as everyone should be aware by this stage, the planning board's acceptance of the draft EIS as adequate for public review does not mean that the planning board agrees with every statement in the document, a document prepared by the applicant and the applicant's consultants. The word draft says it all. The documents and the issues raised are many, but traffic stands out to me. Based on my review of the DEIS and the information provided by the applicant and the planning board's consultants, particularly Dr. Greeley, our traffic consultant, I think it is only fair to say that at this point, I believe the traffic improvements spelled out in the DEIS do not appear to fully mitigate the environmental impacts of the truck traffic that would be generated by the proposed treetops warehouse. Public safety and workable traffic patterns in not only Cornwall, but New Windsor and Newburgh as well, must be our primary concern given the scale of this project. Specifically and significantly, for trucks arriving from the south or departing southbound, the applicant should evaluate the feasibility of a suitable modern highway interchange at 9W and Quaker Avenue that may be required to handle the density and type of trucks likely to be generated by this use. And I believe the final EIS needs to contain an evaluation for that, as well as an evaluation of whether Quaker could carry those loads and new timing or improvement of the signal at Quaker and Route 32. For a variety of reasons specific to each route, Willow Avenue, Angola Road, and Route 293 are likely not suitable for southbounders. For northbounders leaving the site, as well as trucks arriving from the north, I have serious concerns about how the proposed density and vehicle type will impact the city of Newburgh. And I believe that beyond the New York State DOT and their authority over state roads in the towns, a memorandum of agreement or similar would be required between the developer and the city of Newburgh to demonstrate that appropriate mitigation is on track to the north. I'll close by saying that I have mentioned these concerns before, and I will bring them up with more informed detail. And I bring them up now with more informed detail at this stage to give all the stakeholders, including both local citizens and the applicant, the earliest possible insight into my concerns as we continue our review of this matter. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this time.
Just one final note. Lead does reflect the level of expertise in a variety of areas on this planning board, and you should be proud of who you're represented by. Just a short note. All right, now we get down to the public hearing if you pass the quiz. There are several rules that we're going to ask that we follow. When called, speakers are asked to come to the podium and identify themselves so that their names may be entered into the record. We'll also call the person next in line. So last time we had a public hearing here, we waited, there was a delay because the person might have been in the back, like, let's make a deal, and they had to walk forward. So I'm going to call the second person in line so that they're here and present and ready to speak. Speakers are limited to one turn at the mic unless we have additional time after the hearing when everyone who wants to speak who has already spoken. Speakers are limited to no more than 3 minutes. If you agree with what others have said, you can just say so if you want to. If a substantive comment is raised, even by a single person, it will be responded to in the FEIS. Repetitive comments are discouraged, but if you want to say, I agree with so-and-so, or I agree with what Led said, or whatever, at least it'll be on the record, but we don't have to elaborate too much. Not that we're in a terrible rush to get out of here, but speakers are encouraged to submit their comments in writing to Diane Hines at dhines@cornwallnewyork.gov so that they can summarize their comments during the hearing. All substantive written comments will also be responded to in the FEIS. Verbal interruptions, shouting, or other outbursts are prohibited. No speaker shall make any personal attacks on anyone. And this is a courteous crowd, and this is Cornwall, and I'm sure that we can expect that there won't be any of that issue here. If so, however, we do happen to have the wonderful Cornwall Police Department in the back, which we can call forward, and you can be summarily removed. If a person continues to interrupt after the chair has asked them to stop or otherwise refuses to comply, the chair is me, with the directions of the chair, they will be asked to leave and escorted from the meeting room if necessary by our great Cornwall Police Department. So with that, I will begin the public comment period. And thank you for your patience. First in line, of course, is Senator Soufis. You're here. Where is he? Oh, there you go. Hiding in the back.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this hearing. And I do want to begin, you all as planning board members are volunteers, and it's usually a thankless job. So I want to begin with a thank you. You all bring expertise to this process and put in a lot of time. I'm speaking as both a state senator as well as a town of Cornwall resident tonight. And I found out about the treetop proposal via Facebook several months ago. And I've never been approached by Treetop. They've never asked for a meeting. They've never asked for my thoughts. In fact, I've learned that Treetop never approached the town's elected officials asking for their thoughts as community leaders. I understand that Treetop never approached our state assemblyman who's here to ask for his thoughts as a community leader. I know our county legislators here haven't asked him, but I assume that they probably didn't ask him for his thoughts as a both local leader as well as a Cornwall resident. Doesn't seem like they've talked to anybody. They haven't talked to local residents. They haven't asked for anyone's thoughts and input in this community. The one group that I know they have spoken with and talked to and collaborated with is a group called the Orange County Partnership, whose unstated mission it is to pave every square inch of Orange County, predominantly with warehouse distribution. In fact, if you go to their website, there's a title page, Major Investors for the Orange County Partnership, and Treetop, not even built yet, not even a company in Orange County. They're a major investor of the Orange County Partnership, collaborating and pulling levers to try and get this project done. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of concerns. This project, and I know this planning board, you're constrained in what you're allowed to look at. This project is absolutely out of character for the town of Cornwall. It would completely, forever change the face of this community for the worse. And when I look at the proposal, one project is going to create 2 new traffic lights in this town. Not just that, one project, in addition to 2 new traffic lights, is going to alter the timing, reset the timing of 11 more traffic lights as far as the city of Newburgh. And so I want to know, as a father of a soon-to-be 3-year-old, over the course of a year, how many hours am I going to lose with my family and with my daughter because I am now traveling through 13 different traffic lights, 2 new, 11 changed because of one project in this town? This applicant has made it clear that they are not letting on, or they maybe claim that they don't know who the end user is, and this has been mentioned a couple of times already so far. The same is made all throughout, certainly Orange County, I suspect throughout all of New York State, with much frequency. We talked about Amazon before in the town of Montgomery. The applicant wasn't Amazon, it was Sailfish. It was a big secret who the tenant was going to be. They knew the entire time. I'd suggest 99 times out of 100, projects like this know exactly who the tenant is going to be and don't let on. So in addition to the insults of not talking with neighbors, not talking with residents, not talking to local leaders, talking with the Orange County Partnership to try and pull this off, they very likely know who's coming in here and don't want to tell this community. And why? Are we so stupid to think that they're building 1.7 million square feet, 5 buildings, very specifically laid out, and they don't know who the tenant's going to be? They're just going to hope and pray and wish. We hope someone looks at this and moves in. That's crazy, and that's insulting. Furthermore, to the DEIS, given the fact that they almost certainly know who the tenant's going to be here, let us know what the work is going to be coming in and out that this tenant is going to be employing. Because right now they've got hundreds of cars and trucks coming in at different points during the day, and they're going to have us believe those are just industry standards. We want to know who the tenant is and what the actual work is going to be. So I know the planning board, again, is constrained. You can't just say no because we don't like this project. But what I'm asking for on behalf of the people I represent, and certainly, again, as a resident of this great community that we all want to keep great, is to hold this applicant to the highest, strictest standards possible if you all need to move forward. And so, what does that mean? That means you want to install 2 traffic lights? I don't think so. We need 2 entire new interchanges, as Led just said earlier today. Make them pay for entire new infrastructure. We don't just want a couple hundred feet of turning lanes. build an entire third lane on 9W each way to accommodate for the traffic that's coming up and down. The pollution that's going to be thrown into the air, that children are going to develop asthma for, make them pay for nurses in our schools. Make them pay for cops and a better police department to protect 1.7 million square feet of new built-out property. Make them pay for new fire trucks and a new fire substation to protect 1.7 million square feet of new property in this community. This proposal is an insult. It is an outrage, and I'm asking this planning board to do everything you can to stop it. There are two ways forward for this applicant. There are two ways forward, and this is the last thing I'll say. There are two things forward. There are two ways forward. Forward, path number one is that they hit a reset button. Yes, you've got people who own this property, no question, it's their property. However, hit a reset button, talk to the community, talk to our local leaders, talk to the neighbors, and let's find a much lower impact proposal for this property that we all can get around and move forward. Path number two is try and plug away here. And I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for a lot of people in this room, that if they choose path number two, I will and we will fight this with every ounce of our being and make their application process a living hell and hopefully defeat at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I guess you liked it.
With that, I have Assemblyman Yukis. And it will be followed by, I'm sorry, not Assemblyman, I'm sorry, County Legislator. No, Assemblyman, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I always get to follow James, and man, that is tough. I'd like to start by recognizing and thanking the planning board for hosting this meeting and for doing the necessary work of finding out what the public opinion is. And thank you for extending the public opinion part on this. I am Chris Ekus. I'm Assembly Member for the 99th District of New York, which includes the town of Cornwall and the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson. I'm here today to express my deep concerns for the warehouse proposal being presented today by Treetop. I will try to keep my comments as brief as possible, although there's a lot to unpack in this. Concern number one, the property is located near a residential area. Despite what the zoning would suggest, the property is located extremely close to family housing. The negative effects of this would bring to the area noise pollution, air quality issues, safety issues, and more with the constant truck traffic and other work being done. No family could have possibly imagined living next to a massive warehouse project when they purchased their home. And certainly future prospective buyers will decide to pass on living in an area due to these glaring issues. Concern number two, local roads and infrastructure are not prepared to support the increased congestion and activity that this warehouse proposal will bring. We absolutely want all businesses that decide to call Cornwall home to be successful and economically viable. It is good for the tax base, which is good for our local schools and services. The issue here is that the economic success of this particular industry will undoubtedly negatively affect the surrounding community. Local roads in the town and village leading to Route 32 were not built for industrial scale traffic. That is before considering the various inclines, tricky turns that come from them. Mill Street is already on the precipice of falling into the Moodna Creek, okay? It's easy to imagine a scenario in which economic gains are easily offset by increased costs to infrastructure and services such as the fire department, water, and sewage. Concern number three, 9W does not provide easy access to Interstate 84 or 87. While on paper, Cornwall is situated near I-84 and I-87, the reality of the routes tell a different story. 9W poses many hurdles for any logistic operation. To go northbound, as mentioned, you have to go through the city of Newburgh, and to go southbound, you have to go over the mountain, and then, of course, through towns on 9W in Rockland County. That is why I will not support the New York State DOT approving these cuts into 9W. My concerns outlined today shall not be mistaken as anti-development, though. In fact, I welcome innovative businesses looking to set their foundation in Orange County. A commercial property that can meet the needs of a community and respect the geographical location can succeed without disrupting the lives of residents. I simply do not believe that this facility, or any warehouse for that matter, is the safest and best use of the property in question. In fact, I have reviewed Treetop's portfolio, which is quite extensive, and noticed plenty of affordable housing units that they own across this country. It is a shame that such an approach, something so sorely needed here in Cornwall, in Orange County, in New York State, as a whole, was not taken into respect, especially with the encouragement of the governor's State of the State speech just this past week. Cornwall is not just a bunch of lines on a map. It is not just a piece of property. Cornwall is the people that live here in this community. And by all appearances and all inquiries into my office, it has indicated that this is not the type of rateables that the residents of Cornwall want. It does not fit in with the community's character or image. Our towns have limited space, and so it is of the utmost importance that we diligently review projects such as these and work towards proposals that are net positive for both the community and local economy. This proposal, in my honest opinion, does not meet those standards. I look forward to having future conversations on this matter, and I want to thank you for this time.
Thank you, Assemblyman. With that, we have State Senator, Assemblyman, Assemblyman. Do we have a copy of that? Is that real? Our stenographer couldn't quite follow all of it. Was just asking for a copy of it. And with that, I have Kevin Hines, County Legislator, followed by our supervisor, Joshua Wachowski.
Thank you very much for having this hearing, and I know public hearings can be long. I've sat through a lot of them myself. I first want to say that I represent all of Cornwall, and Hudson, portions of New Windsor and Blooming Grove, some 20,000 people. Not one person has called me to say they're in favor of this. To the contrary, this is the most intense issue I have had as a legislator in my 14+ years in office. The project alone has an insulting name. They call it treetop development. Look at what's going to happen. There's going to be no trees left on that property. The consultant talks about a buffer zone. I agree with you 100%. I couldn't imagine buying a property on Knollcrest some year or two ago for $550,000, pay the taxes they do, and have that sitting next to you. That buffer is blatantly insufficient, and same with the people on Hampton Place and all around there. With respect to sewer, I noticed on my sewer bill that the operations portion of it went up 25% this year. This project is going to send more sewer to our plant that is under an expansion or cost for an expansion now. And as our engineer pointed out, they don't even have the easements in place that they require to even build on this site. So the application is premature in my mind. With respect to traffic, Mr. Klosky, I agree with you 100%. As a 40-year fireman, I also serve as the fire commissioner in the town of Cornwall. I have seen tremendous accidents on 9W in that area, especially with respect to Forge Hill Road. The applicant is planning another traffic light at the top of that hill. Could you imagine in a snowstorm, all the oil trucks, and this is for you, Dr. Traffic Consultant, I forgot your last name, all the oil trucks stopping on Route 9W at the bottom of the hill, then trying to proceed up and having to stop because there's another traffic light there with a load of oil. As it is now, in bad storms, cars cannot get up 9W. And now we're going to put another roadblock in front of all of these people. There have been tremendous accidents there at Forge Hill. I know Supervisor Bedetti is here. He's a long-term fireman in Vales Gate. We've worked together at that location at fire calls. With respect to the employee count, we have no idea. How do we know how many parking spaces? We don't know what the uses are, how many employees they're going to need. Just way out of whack. The document glosses over impacts to the Munda Creek and its associated watershed. Munda Creek's a valuable resource to the residents of Orange County. Munda Creek is a tributary to the Munda Marsh, a Class A wetland located immediately down gradient from this site. Steep slopes to the west exist on Route 32 in the area of Forge Hill Road, all along Route 32, including at the end of Quaker Avenue. We are currently seeking a $12 million grant to fix Mill Street, as Assemblyman Ekus pointed out. This is going to further erode that because our engineer also talked about pulling some 783 cubic yards off the site. Orange County DPW has commented. I know you all have that letter. I have it with me as well. They commented that most of the alleged improvements, they call it traffic improvements, I call it traffic diminishment, because the last thing we need is more truck traffic getting off of 9W onto Quaker Avenue. We saw that debacle when West Point was hauling all the rock, initially on Angola Road, then on Quaker. It was a disaster. Also, if you were to widen 9W at the Angola Road exit, that is a known wetland right there. You can't just make it wider. It's not okay. When you look at Quaker, we have significant accidents at Quaker and 32 on a regular basis. Now we're going to put 18-wheel traffic onto that. And they're talking about claiming property rights, I'm told, too, on Quaker Avenue. Could you imagine someone having to give up their property rights for one builder to come in and make money? It's absurd. So Cornwall, the bedroom community, should just say, we give up, take over our town. Hell no. Now, Orange County Department of Planning has responded. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read it. I heard from your consultant you got it today. I got it today also. But this is one of the first times in my 14-plus years as a legislator where Orange County Planning Department said, this is not going to work on that site. And the first, I'm going to have to read it. The conceptual site plan has significant countywide impacts to traffic and environment, among others. After review of the DEIS and mitigation measures, the department does not recommend approval.
Legislator, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's like 4 minutes. And
It's what?
I'd ask if you cut it a little short. I've asked.
What do you say?
Excuse me. I've asked 4 minutes.
I didn't hear what you said because you're not up to the microphone.
You're over time.
All right, I got one sentence left. The plan would require several variances, both use and area, as well as zoning amendments to achieve the applicant's desired effect. The intent of the PCT zoning district is to protect lands that are visually sensitive while allowing for a range of limited non-residential uses in a way that is consistent with the town's conservation goals. As proposed, the plan fails to achieve the stated intent of the PCD zoning district. These are from the experts in the Orange County Planning Department. I will tell you, I'm going to continue to work with all the people in Orange County, the planning department, and the DPW to stop this project because it's not going to work as designed.
Thank you. But
For the record, all written material submitted, and we're in receipt of that letter from the Orange County Planning Department. We have regular communication with them. All of that is a matter of record already. So from this point forward, those things do not need to be read. They are part of the record already. And I don't mean to offend you. Okay? All right. Sorry, Josh. Josh Wojciechowski, the Cornwall Town Supervisor.
sure. Let me first thank the planning board for all their hard work and continued commitment to our community. Given the size and scope of this proposed project, I am pleased that we are having robust public participation at tonight's hearing on the draft environmental impact statement. Second, I want to be clear that tonight I'm here speaking for myself as both town supervisor and a resident of the town of Cornwall. My intention tonight is simply to highlight and emphasize the main issues which I feel need to be carefully reviewed and thoroughly addressed. Before I get to specific issues I have in mind, I just want to briefly quote from the town of Cornwall's comprehensive plan vision statement. I think it really sums up what our community is all about and the character we seek to preserve for our current and future generations. The plan seeks to enhance our strong base as a healthy, thriving, primarily residential community. The plan envisions an involved, diverse, successful community that supports the town's residents as it seeks to attract small businesses to a walkable and attractive Main Street, encourages beneficial low-impact tourism, and is proud to highlight and support its cultural, natural, recreational, agricultural, and historical assets. Key to the plan is preserving the character and welfare of our community, protecting our natural environment, attracting new businesses, thoughtfully growing tourism, and developing, promoting our existing assets. That is what the town's comprehensive plan envisions for Cornwall. Let me get to my concerns about the project, which are stormwater, traffic, visual noise, and financial impacts. So first, stormwater. After reviewing the current version of the Stormwater Protection Plan, I have the following concerns and believe that they should be addressed in a supplemental EIS by the applicant. First off, the town put in place new stormwater regulations in November of 2023, which has increased the water quality standards to 110%, and there are other regulations as well. So I believe that a supplemental EIS will need to be done by the applicant in order to fully address those new regulations. The town also put into place a new tree preservation law that was adopted in December. The DEIS is also silent on that as well, so that will have to be addressed. This does not fully account for all of the downstream flooding impacts on municipal infrastructure, commercial, residential properties resulting from the loss of water absorption capacity and the increased water discharge due to the considerable increase in impermeable surfaces. This does not address the existing severe stream bank erosion along the Moodna Creek, which you can all see when you drive up Forge Hill Road. There will be a warehouse, somewhere up there. It does not consider the impacts of turbid water discharge into the Moodna Creek, Moodna Marsh on species that are in decline or endangered. You've got striped bass, American shad, sturgeon. Traffic and community character. The developers plan to handle increased truck traffic with the creation of many new traffic intersections. This will require easements from New York State and Orange County, along with the acquisition of easements from private property owners. I would urge New York State DOT and Orange County to make sure that community character as well as safety is strongly considered when examining these proposed traffic measures on roads under their control. I think additional studies are needed as well. Cornwall currently has 5 traffic lights. I'm concerned that without further studies and redesign of more appropriate traffic measures that are less impactful to our community, that the character of Cornwall could be changed forever and impaired by the proposed traffic mitigation and could put our tourism-based economy at risk, which includes the regional and world-renowned Storm King Arts Center that New York State has invested tens of millions of dollars into. Financial and tax impacts. The studies conducted by the applicant to examine economic, financial, tax impacts do not account for tax breaks or pilots that the project may end up receiving and would reduce the direct financial benefits to the town and school district. I believe that we need further analysis in that area and there should be additional studies required. New York State has invested millions into Cornwall via the CFA and New York Forward to further develop and support our visitor and tourism-based economy that focuses on the Storm King Arts Center and outdoor adventure activity. We need to understand how this project could have negative impacts on our existing economy. Noise and visual impacts. This does not adequately address how to deal with the noise impacts in adjacent residential neighborhoods as well as neighborhoods along proposed truck routes. Does not adequately address visual impacts from the size and scale of proposed warehouses and would negatively impact strategically important view sheds from both sides of the river. Imagine if you're on top of Mount Beacon or Storm King Mountain, you're going to look down and you're going to see the tops of these warehouses. I mean, who wants to go hiking and see that? Let me see here. And lastly, in closing, first let me just, once again, thank the planning board. I would ask that you keep the public hearing open until February. So this would actually allow for more time and for anyone that could not be here tonight. So, I would just ask that the planning board keep the public hearing open tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, if you are reading something, if you could provide it to Fran, because she's having a little bit of difficulty hearing and deciphering, and for the record, are you having difficulty as well? Okay, apologies. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the public hearing, and I'm going to again reiterate, I will try and keep it to those 3 minutes if it's possible. We'll give you a little warning, and maybe I'll start banging the gavel or something, but everybody has a right to speak, and we'd like to try and get it in. We have Steve Jones up, and behind him, I have Nancy Bryant. Okay, you'll be next. Okay, Steve?
Good evening, members of the Planning Board and fellow community members. As the chairman of the Economic Development Committee and as a private resident, I'm here tonight to provide public comments on the DEIS. While acknowledging the importance of progress and development, it's crucial to ensure that these endeavors align with our community's shared vision and outcomes further support sustainable economic development. Our committee is attentive to the proposed project and its potential implications. Given the recent large state investments in our town and the Storm King Art Center to encourage and bolster tourism, we must safeguard and build upon these efforts to position ourselves as a desirable destination. It is our belief that this project has the potential to negatively impact our efforts with factors such as high volume of tractor-trailer traffic and the size of the proposed facilities. From our observations to date, this area of concern does not appear to have been addressed sufficiently in the project scope and their draft environmental impact statement. To address this concern, we recommend you consider requiring the project developers to fund an independent study to thoroughly assess its effects on local tourism and ensure development proceeds in accordance with the public's best interest as determined by the public. This study should consider factors relevant to the project's scope and the DEIS, ensuring the comprehensive understanding of its specific impacts on our community's tourism and sustainable development initiatives. We also believe that the more information and modeling is needed on the financial impact from the applicants taking benefits from the Orange County IDA and or the 485-B program. I was also going to request that you guys extend the public comments for 60 days, so thank you for extending this. And just want to thank you for your attention for these matters. And I'll hand this paper to everybody.
You did it. Thank you very much. Nancy and Bill Bryan, and Susan Hoff would be next. Okay.
Nancy Bryan, and this is my husband, Bruce Bryan. We live at 80 Quaker Avenue in the town. This is in regard to the Treetop Warehouse plan. This plan must be rejected in its entirety. It goes against zoning regulations. It violates most environmental requirements. The plan doesn't just impact a small area. It will impact a huge part of Cornwall. I will focus on the personal impact to our property. We are at 80 Quaker Avenue. Our house and property have been there since 1811. When Phil Greeley spoke of the traffic study, he only mentioned the impact to the ramps of at 9W and Quaker Inn and Goal and widening them. What we didn't hear was the severe impact to all of us on Quaker Avenue. When was someone going to let us know that the plan calls for taking the front of our properties? And specifically for our property, it calls to reconstruct our driveway. Really? Is this a joke? Not one bit of information has been shared with us until the documents were made public, and thankfully we looked at them. Their plan states that easement and acquisition will not take place until further in on the construction phase. And what if all the property owners refuse their plan? Their plans show the line going through our stone wall and stone pillars that have stood for more than a century. Their plans encroach on our property and goes past the county right-of-way, which pretty sure doesn't take property from citizens to benefit a private developer. The plan calls for lights at each intersection of Quaker and 9W, north and south entrances and exits. Let's see, a light at 32 and 107, now 2 more lights and a light at Elm. Newsflash, the last 2 major accidents have been at Quaker and 32, where there is a light. We are putting you, the town, and the developer on notice.
Excuse me, Nancy, would you slow it down just a little?
I'm sorry, and this was handed in already,
Oh,
Fran,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. This horrific plan will greatly devalue our property. At a time in our life when we have worked hard for over 30 years to maintain and improve what we have, to have the chance that this developer will be allowed to go ahead with this, causing us a great hardship financially, is beyond comprehension. Our home and property will be worth a fraction of what it should be. Is this what Cornwall is about? Yay for developers and nay for homeowners? The ramp property will also require private property acquisition in several spots. Who does this? Our overriding questions, why wouldn't New York State DOT and Orange County DPW even consider this invasion onto private property? Why isn't there a plan to put a single light on 9W at their entrance for access from 9W South and 9W North? For your own information also, at the beginning of December, when the plans were first released, the Water Department was never contacted about the water line and hydrants on Quaker Avenue and the impact on the expansion on Quaker. And the town of New Windsor was never contacted about all the plans to travel into Five Corners and up Forge Hill Road. Maybe they have now, but to release plans without having contacted public entities, forget about all of us private landowners, seems very suspect and underhanded. This must be stopped now. You cannot allow developers to destroy private property values. A warehouse complex of this magnitude belongs close to major highways, not in a residential area. It is time to forego fear of lawsuits by developers and to stand up for the citizens of this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Susan Hoff
Evening.
and Newt.
My name's Knut Hoff. Susan Hoff and I live at 80 Quaker Avenue.
90.
I'm sorry, 90. Our neighbors live at 80. I can't be more eloquent than
Speak into the mic, please.
I can't be more eloquent than the people who preceded me, so I'm not going to take time other than to say, yes, we do live on Quaker. Our concerns might seem personal, since part of our property is apparently going to be seized. However, my feelings go beyond simply Quaker. We've lived here for 20 years, more than 20 years. Our son went to school here from kindergarten on. He's now in grad school. And this is not how we'd like to see the end of our time in Cornwall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle Query, and on deck would be Win Gold. You'd be on deck with and Michelle Query.
Thank you to the planning board for your civic service. It's important and thankless, as has been mentioned, but not tonight, so thank you. I'm going to raise some points that I don't think have been mentioned. One of them is about, I'm sorry, I forgot to say I live on Frost Lane. One of the concerns that has not been addressed in the DEIS that I think most of us wouldn't actually realize would be a concern to be considered is the impact of trucking and those driving the trucks looking for places to park. The proposal in the DEIS failed to address the significant impact on the town due to trucks looking to park, turning around, parking legally and illegally, and the sheer degradation of roads and shoulders from the volume of trucks. The proposed development does not include parking for tractor-trailer trucks, only parking for drop trailers. These are trailers that are preloaded, then swapped with an empty trailer when a truck comes in. According to a professional tractor-trailer driver who's familiar with Cornwall and has been in the industry for over a decade, drivers will be getting creative with parking. He states, unfortunately, in my industry, too many drivers are inconsiderate and ignorant. Shoulders will be used. Lawns will be damaged by trucks turning onto roads they don't belong to. Traffic will be a nightmare. Just picture a rig like mine, over 70 feet long, 13 feet 6 inches high, 8 inches wide, lost on Willow by Frost Lane, looking to turn around with a rookie driver behind the wheel. And he says, I continue, most of these warehouses deal with big trucking companies like Swift, Prime, etc. Many of these drivers are new. Many don't speak or read English. Hence the concern with being able to navigate. He also said that the closest truck stop is Pilot in Newburgh, which is 84 and 17K with 133 spots. This is almost always full already. The T/A Montgomery Neelytown Road truck stop has 160 spots. Again, this is almost always full. Rest areas in Middletown have 12 spots each. So his question is, where are all these trucks going to go? And unfortunately, the answer will be parking lots school parking lots, roadsides, shoulders, you name it. Laurel Crest Park, that's where they're going to park. The DEIS fails to address the environmental impacts and quality of life impacts of truck parking in the community. This driver analyzed the plan and used his industry knowledge to estimate that a conservative 1,000 trucks per day will access the site. The DEIS fails to consider what happens when a sizable percentage of those trucks are throughout Cornwall, and that not only is going to impact us in terms of the physical space the trucks are taking, but also noise pollution from refrigerated trucks running. Even trucks that are not refrigerated where people are staying in them will need to be running with a 5-minute idle, because they do have a 5-minute idle at least built in. Also, there's going to be loss of parking to residents.
Michelle, I apologize, but it's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank
I
you.
apologize to the whole crowd because I'm trying to keep it going.
And so I'll just
Could
conclude.
you submit that?
Yep, I'm not going to submit this piece of paper, but I will email it.
If you would please, that
Yep.
would be great.
And just to conclude, I want to thank you for extending the public comment period.
In gold, and on deck would be Ted Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I'm Win Gold. I'm the deputy supervisor. Previously, I served on this committee for 16 years, and prior to that, I chaired the Economic Development Advisory Committee for 8 years. The supervisor touched on one issue which I think is critical when considering this project, and that's the economic impact. They made a brief analysis of what the project would generate in terms of tax revenue, salaries, et cetera. I think that the applicant should be required to fund an independent analysis of the financial impacts on the community so that we have real numbers with real data backing them up. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you, Wayne. Ted?
Good evening, Chairman Novesky and members of the Planning Board. Ted Warren. I'm the Public Policy Coordinator for the Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and I'm also a resident of Cornwall. HHLT's mission is to protect the natural resources, rural character, and scenic beauty of the Hudson Highlands, and we hold...
Excuse me, Ted?
Yeah.
You're really great because I know you're trying to get within the 3 minutes, but I'm going to 3-minute clock over again. You just talk just a little bit slower so that we can make sure we get every word.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
And also, please submit the letter when you're done.
Yeah, I'll give you this when I'm done. Ted Warren, Public Policy Coordinator for Hudson Highlands Land Trust. HHLT's mission is to protect the natural resources, rural character, and scenic beauty of the Hudson Highlands, and we hold several conservation easements here in Cornwall. We're also listed as an interested agency on this project. I'm here tonight to express our concerns regarding the draft environmental impact statement for this project. Although we've not been able to thoroughly review the entire DEIS because it is quite long and complex, we've noted that we believe there to be deficiencies in the DEIS that warrant further review. We're concerned that the analysis and proposed mitigations listed by the applicant with regard to the flora, fauna, and wetland habitat on the property are insufficient and do not properly account for impacts from air, noise, and light pollution on wildlife and their habitat. The required DEC habitat analysis has not been included in this DEIS, so we feel that this aspect of the DEIS is incomplete. Additionally, we've noted that the DEIS fails to account for the recently enacted legislation in the town of Cornwall. Other folks have talked about this already, but neither the updated stormwater pollution protection regulations or the tree preservation law are acknowledged in the DEIS, and it's our position that the applicant should be required to submit supplemental information that addresses those laws and that can then be reviewed by involved and interested agencies and the public. We also have significant concerns about the regional impact this project may have in terms of the scenic resources that make this area so special. The visual renderings that were submitted as part of the DEIS fail to provide examples of what this project will look like from commonly accessed vantage points in Cornwall, such as Scunnamunk State Park and Black Rock Forest, And they also failed to provide examples of the viewshed impact across the river from vantage points such as Mount Beacon and the Hudson Highlands State Park. A development project of this scale has the potential to radically alter the character of the town of Cornwall and impact the ecological integrity of the environment that many here cherish. HHLT is respectfully asking the planning board to consider what Mr. Klosky suggested and extend the public comment period out to 60 days to ensure that there's ample time for us and for consultants that we've retained to provide us expertise and guidance on certain specific issues to have ample time to review the DEIS and any supplemental materials that may be necessary for the applicant to provide after tonight. Thank you for hosting this public hearing, and thank you for considering these remarks.
Thank you, Tim. We have Kevin Dragonchuk, and on deck would be Jonathan Clark from Scenic Hudson.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Noveski, members of the Planning Board, consultants. I'm Kevin Draganchuk. My apologies for my height, nothing more. I'm Kevin Draganchuk. I'm the president of CE Engineers of the town of Crawford here in Orange County. I'm a New York State licensed professional engineer. And at the request of Hudson Highlands Trust, CE Engineers evaluated the treetop development DIS and specifically the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, the SWIP. Our evaluation focused on the proposed mitigation measures intended to prevent adverse environmental impacts related to land disturbance and construction activities, stormwater generation, collection, management, and treatment, both during construction and after construction, with a special focus on the increased risk of flooding. In sum, treetop and its proposed mitigation measures are inadequate to prevent significant adverse environmental impacts resulting from stormwater generation and discharges at treetop. The biggest flaw in the SWIP and its proposed mitigation measures, which is intended to collect, treat stormwater and control peak discharges to reduce flooding risks, as Mr. Arnaud and the town supervisor pointed out, is that it does not conform to the recently enacted town stormwater standards. Those standards are intended to safely control and manage stormwater resulting from high-intensity stormwater events, like thunderstorms. They're intended to reduce flooding risks, such as the devastating floods of this last summer, and they're higher standards than what's currently in place in the regulations from New York State DEC. For this reason alone, the SWIP is inadequate and requires redesign. I want to just do a brief discussion on the conditions at treetop and how they relate to stormwater generation and peak discharges. The site, as we all know, is currently forested. That results in relatively low stormwater generation. That's going to change dramatically during construction. Trees and vegetation will be removed, soils exposed, and equipment compacts soils, which is essentially the stormwater equivalent of turning soils into concrete. The soils on the site are poorly draining. They don't effectively infiltrate stormwater. Compaction will only worsen this. There's steep slopes and high groundwater elevations. All of these factors are going to result in increased stormwater generation, velocities, and peak discharge rates. During construction, the big risk is going to be soil erosion. The risk is going to be muddy stormwater going into the Moodna Creek with all the associated adverse impacts. We're talking to the aquatic environment, aquatic species, and of course, recreational opportunities for the public. And all those site conditions I mentioned are just going to make the erosion and sediment control plans more difficult to implement and be effective. After construction, there'll be 60 acres of roads, buildings, and parking areas for the warehousing operations. All the extensive truck traffic that's been discussed with the associated pollution, fluid spills, air quality impacts, metals deposition. And of course, when you have warehousing operations, there's always the possibility of material spills that subsequently get picked up in stormwater and discharged. If they're not properly mitigated, the stormwater discharges during the warehousing activities are going to increase the volumes and rates of stormwater discharges, resulting in increased flood levels and substantial pollution discharges. Just a little bit furthermore, a few more inadequacies than the SWIP. New York State DEC currently has a draft new stormwater management design manual It's been in draft for about 2 years now, can come out anytime. It's going to have the newest standards in the state. They're going to be the most protective standards to the state. The current SWIP is based on the outdated 2015 design manual. Furthermore, the SWIP proposes the use of infiltration basins to treat stormwater. As already stated, the soils on the site have poor infiltrative capacity. There's high groundwater. They're planning to import fill material on the locations of the infiltration basins. And the new DEC manual specifically has improved standards for soil infiltration testing and infiltration stormwater practice design. So in sum, in conclusion, based on my evaluation of the SWIP and the inadequacies identified, and also considering the size of the project and magnitude of the potential adverse impacts, CA Engineers recommends redesign of the SWIP to meet the new standards, that the planning board keep the public hearing and comment period open on tree tap as long as necessary to allow the public, the planning board, its consultants, adequate time for the opportunity to fully evaluate and comment on the DIS and its proposed mitigation measures to prevent adverse impacts to the environment and community. Thank you very much.
Could we have a copy of that?
I previously submitted a letter to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Warren, Ted, could we get your copy as well? Okay, with that, I have Jonathan Clark.
All right, let's see.
Excuse me, on deck, we have Stephanie Giabatti. We're losing our audience. Oh, okay, I got it. Okay, good, sorry.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Clark, and I'm an advocacy attorney with Scenic Hudson. Scenic Hudson was founded in 1960. Sorry, was it one more time? Oh, sorry. I'm an advocacy attorney with Scenic Hudson. Scenic Hudson was founded in 1963 to protect Storm King Mountain from a destructive industrial project. And now we are credited with launching the modern grassroots environmental movement. Today, we are proud to be the largest environmental organization operating in the Hudson Valley. Scenic Hudson is seriously concerned that the development of this 190-acre forested site into nearly 2 million square feet of warehouse complexes with 125 acres of impervious surface will likely have an adverse impact both on the environment and community, even beyond the borders of Cornwall. The site's location along the Moodna Creek requires careful planning in order to avoid hydrologic and ecological impacts. Similarly, the project's conspicuous visibility from Storm King Mountain and other public park receptors will require careful mitigation if it can be effectively mitigated at all. But perhaps of equal importance, an honest assessment of alternatives is needed to identify a productive use for the site that does not cause unnecessary harm. As lead agency in this environmental review, the Planning Board has the responsibility and authority to ensure that reasonable alternatives are assessed and potential impacts are identified so that they can be avoided, reduced, or mitigated to the maximum extent practical. Our staff has begun its review of the DEIS and will submit more substantive written comments before the comment period closes. But tonight, in the interest of time, I would like to briefly discuss a few of our initial concerns. First, the project, as currently proposed, would be partially constructed on lands where warehouses are not currently in allowed use. As a result, the applicant has requested a zoning map amendment to designate the entire site as planned commercial development. The zoning amendments are committed to the discretion of the town board, which is under no obligation to grant an amendment simply because it has been requested. Scenic Hudson believes that the town board should not be compelled to rezone this portion of the site. And in fact, rezoning the site to planned commercial development would preclude certain residential uses which are currently allowed, despite the fact that housing is an identified need in both Cornwall and Orange County. Likewise, the current proposal requires a height variance which must be reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. We believe the project could be viable even without this increase in height, and that at any rate, the applicant would not be deprived of a reasonable use of their land without it. Finally, the Planning Board must ensure that the project complies with the town's standards for a special use permit. Which we do not believe have been met. Again, we hope to address this more fully in our written comments. Moving on, besides the required no action alternative and the applicant's preferred alternative, the DEIS currently only considers 3 other alternatives, all involving similar warehousing uses. The Planning Board retains the authority to request additional information from the applicant to address the issues identified during this review. Scenic Hudson suggests that all additional alternatives, potentially involving a mix of residential, retail, and recreational uses, should be considered and evaluated against the current proposal. Now, I would like to thank the Planning Board for extending the public comment period on this hearing, we would like to, again, reiterate, well, thank you for extending it, but reiterate our earlier request to extend it further to ensure that all involved stakeholders are able to fully review the DEIS and submit comments. Again, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Do we have your comments? John, I'm sorry, I can't read your LeKay. LeKay will be on deck.
Okay.
I can't read that.
All right, good evening. I want to sincerely thank the planning board and all of those that have spoken before me. My name is Stephanie Ciabatti, and I live at 30 Knollcrest Court. My husband, Paul, is an active duty Army officer engineer assigned to Army Corps of Engineers at West Point. I'm an infrastructure project manager and previously served active duty.
Could you speak just a bit slower?
Slower, okay. I'm an infrastructure project manager and previously served in the Army on active duty for 12 years as an Army engineer officer. We moved to Cornwall at the end of August of 2023 from North Carolina. However, Paul grew up here in Cornwall, graduating from this high school in 2009, and his parents have lived here for over 40 years. One of the highlights of our home is the backyard that extends into the beautiful forest. The natural setting provides us with the joy of observing deer and other various animals freely roaming through our backyard. We live at the end of the cul-de-sac. Slower?
Turn it down, just slow it down.
I'm just trying to stay under time.
Is having
All right.
difficulty.
We live at the end of the cul-de-sac, and we find immense value in the limited traffic and privacy and enhanced safety, especially since we have 2 small children. The repercussions of this industrial park will not only adversely affect us, the other residents on Knollcrest, but have detrimental impact on those living in the vicinity of this extensive development. The significant decrease in property value resulting from this proposed development raises serious concerns. The allure that initially drew us to this property will diminish, potentially making it difficult to sell our home, or if sold, could lead to substantial loss of tens of thousands of dollars or more on our initial purchase. As a young family in our 30s, we have diligently worked to establish a financial foundation for our future, encompassing both retirement plans and our children's education. The unsettling possibility of having to dip into our retirement and education funds to offset the financial setback caused by this project is a distressing scenario. The plans propose a parking lot in Building D, right above Knollcrest Court, that is 273,000 square feet with 15 parking spaces, 15 loading spaces, 66 trailer storages, directly adjacent to Knollcrest Court. The entire proposed industrial park is over 2 million square feet. To put that into perspective, the average Costco is 146,000 square feet. That is equivalent to 14 Costcos right in the middle of this residential area. Reference the DEIS document, the visual analysis exhibit. It has a Knollcrest Court specific picture. The proposed building will be clearly visible from my front door and my children's bedroom windows. The proposed action is most certainly inconsistent with predominant architectural and scale and character. Reference the document potential blast monitoring. I have several concerns about this. Monitoring location 3 encompasses my home as well as my neighbor at 29 Knollcrest. What potential effects will the blasting operations have on our property? What are the technology and protocols used to mitigate risks and ensure the well-being of residents in the vicinity? Will someone need to access our property to monitor these blasting operations, and if so, to what extent? As an interested agency, has the Army Corps of Engineers been contacted regarding the impact of the wetlands? Regarding noise, we can clearly hear Cornwall football games being played from our house on Knollcrest. I can only imagine the noise disturbance we will have to endure during the year plus of construction and then the 24/7-hour operations, along with significant increased tractor trailer traffic along 9W. I have several additional concerns, but have not been able to fully review the DEIS comments. I thank you for extending the public comments, and I appreciate your attention to this matter and trust that you will consider the voices of the concerned residents in your decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. John Lucas. Oh, Stephanie, do you have that? Thank you. Oh, you emailed it. Okay, thank you. On deck is Jerry Bauer, I believe it is, or Brower.
I had a lot to say, but it's pretty much been said by everybody here. I want to thank everybody for coming and for everybody for listening.
Could you introduce, I know I said your name.
My name is John Lucas. I live at 31 Stately Oaks. Building D is 200 feet from my back door. To put that in relation, that's about half the size of this. It's probably this building twice, and I would have to look at that on a daily basis. I had a lot written, and everybody said it. I mean, this is just a bad idea from the start. That's why I started the Facebook page. That Facebook page has been in existence for 7 weeks. It has over 1,500 members. It had 100 when it started back in August. Until I lit the fire and started this, we have a petition that's been signed by 1,500 people that says this is a bad idea for Cornwall. And I think we all see that. I want to thank the board, everybody here, everybody, Kristen, what you said, Lee, what you said is what we've all been wanting to hear you to say, but it just hasn't been said and no one has heard it. I want to thank you all. I want to thank all the politicians for everything they said. Thank you for coming out because this had to be done.
Thank you very much. Jerry Bauer. On deck is Virginia Scott.
Planning board and chairman, members, consultants, and the community. My name is Jerry Brower. I live in Stately Oaks, right next to John, who just spoke. We border the southernmost area of the proposed land development. I've lived here for over 43 years and seen all, the history that Dominic went through. And that project, I mean, it was just defeated for a number of reasons, very similar to what's going on here about the air quality, pollution, et cetera. We've written emails on the scoping session about that. And I don't want to repeat it, obviously everything that's been said by a lot of people that I had planned to. But one thing I found in the DEIS, reviewing it, 800 pages plus in there. Transportation over 1,200. I started reviewing it. I got through the executive summary and then started to cherry pick different areas. So I applaud extending it to 30 days. But we could use 60 days and we still wouldn't get through it. All right. So that's something for further consideration. But it's not the most user-friendly document, with all due respect. I mean, a lot of work has been put into it. I understand that. But I went to the appendix, which is listed on page 10, and there are no page numbers. The first appendix A is on page 238 in the DEIS. And then you have to go back and see, well, where's B? What page is that? That might be another 15 pages down. So it was extremely difficult to really navigate through that document. And I know in the planning board, a couple of the meetings, somebody had stated this should be a very user-friendly document so the public can easily review it. Well, my experience was to the contrary, unfortunately. Economic benefits. The other gentleman who was up here was a prior planning member of a committee. A lot of the same stuff that he said. I think there really should be a detailed analysis of how these figures, the economic impact were calculated. The cost for 1.7 million square feet, I'm afraid, is far underestimated. So I don't see how they came up with and said on page 214, proposed mitigation measures as required as the project will promote positive economic activity. No mitigation measures are anticipated to be required at this time. That's a point number they threw out. I'd like to see a range. What if they're 25% lower? What if it's 50% lower? What's the break-even point for these warehouses? How do you know it's going to really benefit, all these benefits they're talking about is going to benefit Cornwall? I don't see it unless we do a detailed analysis on risks, assumptions, and how they arrived at all that. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk just briefly about was land use. It's already been mentioned, 7,500 trees will be cut down. New York State, the 2019 Climate Act requires New York State to be carbon neutral by 2050. And cutting down 80% of the trees back there is not going to do it because they're capturing all this carbon. This makes no sense from that point of view alone. And then it was just mentioned, I think Stephanie mentioned about blasting. What they said under air quality and noise impacts on page 19. They said the major concern is what Treetop is saying during the construction operation will be the control of fugitive dust during site clearing, excavation, demolition, grading, and or blasting operations. Best construction management practices will be employed to reduce sources and extent of such emissions. What best practices? How are they going to do that? My property and John's next door and Stephanie's is so close, we're going to experience, severe impact from that. And also the flooding impact. If you level and you make that ground impervious, right now in the last month or so, we've had this tremendous rain, as you all know. I've got pictures, which I'm going to forward in written comments after, showing how the water's right up behind my property now, before they would do any clearing. I can only imagine what would happen if this really goes ahead. I'll be underwater. We'll be totally underwater in our property. And finally, zoning. This is in the town of Cornwall. Prohibited uses, 158.17.c. Any other use, whether specified above or not, and there's like 14 prohibited items, but it says that is such a nature as to be detrimental to neighboring properties by reason of emission of odor, dust, refuse, garbage, vibration, any other factor that is dangerous to the comfort, peace, enjoyment, health, or safety of the area of the community is prohibited. I don't see how this project, I do not see how this project complies with that prohibited use.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we get that? Can I get your statement?
I will submit the written comments
Okay,
afterwards.
thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
And John Bruno is on deck.
Good evening. Virginia Scott. I live on Willow Avenue in the town of Cornwall. I'm also councilwoman in the town of Cornwall. I've met many people in my neighborhood. I grew up in that neighborhood, so I'm trying to separate what I emotionally feel about what's that could possibly happen. Because as you said, a developer has the right to owner has a right to develop their property because they own it, just as long as they adhere to our zoning regulations. I want to thank the planning board before I start. I want to make one correction. The developers did come to the town of Cornwall, one of our town board meetings. I believe it was in October of 2021. And I remember after the presentation, my first question was, the size of these buildings and how are you going to address the erosion? I'm concerned about the erosion. As a member of the board, I work with the Moodna Creek Intermunicipal Water Shed Committee, and we're looking at the erosional problems we're having on Mill Street. And the first response from the developer was, well, heavy buildings will actually stop the erosion, because I pointed out that one of their buildings was right on the edge or towards the edge of the embankment. So right away, I thought did have some difficulties. But I want to talk about, I know a lot of the residents that I have visited on Knollcrest, Jerry and John, Howard Street, Frost Lane, they're going to really get the brunt of this development. When you talk about, I can go on with the quality of life, but no one has mentioned light pollution. And when you talk about light pollution, you're talking about hormonal interference with sleep cycles and circadian rhythms. We talk about the bats, our endangered species. That's going to have an impact on them as well. Kristen, I really want to thank you for your comments, because when I was at Town Hall looking at the actual plans, you get blurry with this, with the computer screen. It's just too much reading all this. And I applaud any of you that really go through all those pages like that. But the vegetation plan, when I was looking at that was very sparse as far as any kind of noise barriers. And I'm thinking about all the people on Knollcrest and John and Jerry's properties, 200 feet from their homes. I really think that's insufficient, especially, and then you mentioned the overnight traffic, but the blasting plan. The other thing I want to bring up is Jerry brings up a good point about the dust and the whole idea of when they're clearing the land. I live right in front of Lee Road School, so when they were doing all the parking lot and the cleaning, all the dust coming up, I literally had to go indoors because the dust, it was difficult to breathe. So I'm concerned about the respiratory ailments in people, especially, I know there's a child on Knollcrest that deals with a lot of respiratory issues, and that's not healthy to them. But, okay, so I'm off of that. The other thing I want to talk about, and I want to get to my 3 minutes, it's really important. Sean, you also brought up some good, points about the utilities. I remember being involved in Central Hudson when they were doing their boring and the gas line, the potentials of, they were actually endangering gas lines. So I really want to make sure the developer is actually consulting with utility companies when they're doing these activities. Sewer and water, we're spending millions of dollars in Cornwall, as Sean knows, developing and remediating our sewer system, which we are under consent order to actually remedy. These are going to have a huge financial impact in our town. Lead, the last thing I want to just point out, and this is all about transportation. I believe in the August meeting, your planning board, you actually said you couldn't see the flow of traffic and where it was actually going. I agree with you. I still have a hard time understanding how in a 9W is in a residential neighborhood, it's going through it. And I'm glad that Orange County Planning and the Orange County DPW has come out on this, but what hasn't happened is the DOT. I appreciate Senator Skoufis and Assemblymember Ekus coming in and, supporting, the community and being against the project. They have more of a luxury than we as town board members. But I want them to press the DOT. The DOT needs to come out and actually evaluate this plan and protect not just Cornwall, the entire communities surrounding it. We're talking Newburgh, we're talking New Windsor, we're talking actually towards Highland Falls, towards Woodbury. There's a lot of communities that need protection. And the last thing I want to say is, all right, just one point, I promise. And this is an important one. I remember when Senator Skoufis was talking about sailfish, I was sitting in the audience with the Orange County Legislature, and they never mentioned what sailfish was until the end, and it was Amazon. We still don't know who is planning to actually utilize this, and I am concerned. And last night at our town board meeting, I mentioned that we do need to have a consultant in terms of actually laying out for the public what is the economic benefit for here in this community. Because truthfully, we know with all these with the tax codes and tax deferments, the pilots, the community, our school districts, we could actually be financially harmed by this project. So I thank you again, and last thing, I don't stand behind you, this board. I stand with you, and I really sincerely thank you for all your diligence.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. John Bruno and Christian Brunelli will be on deck.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Planning Board members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is John Bruno. I come to you as a resident from Knollcrest Court, and glad to hear everything that was said before me. I agree with 100%, but I want to give you my perspective from Knollcrest Court. Very concerned about the noise, not just with the construction and the trucks in and out, but even during the operation, right? So that the normal trucks that would be coming in and out all day long is a big concern of mine. My two new proposed neighbors, Building D and Building E specifically, are going to be like right adjacent to Knollcrest Court, according to this plan. We've got 53 docks on Building 3 alone, and I think about just as many on Building E. So it's over 100 docks right there. I can't imagine the noise that's going to be generated from those trucks. Also, I don't see any noise barriers in the proposal along The adjacent building, D to Knollcrest Court, I don't see them along Route 9W, which I believe they should be. So I'm kind of surprised at that. Specifically, with regard to setbacks and buffers, the setback on this project are so close to the residential homes, there's no way that this does not drastically affect neighboring property values. The setback on building D are 100 feet to the front and 50 feet to the rear. And the setback on an average home in Cornwall is 60 feet front and 60 feet rear. These figures are completely out of proportion when you compare the square footage of building D, which is 273,568 square feet, which is 109 times bigger than the average home in the area, which is 2,500 square feet. I would think that we can scale, I mean, at a minimum against the entire project, but scale back building D so that it's far away from the adjacent residential areas. And I'm also very concerned about the traffic that will be coming in, that will be egressing from the facility, that will have to cross over 9W. I didn't see any traffic light, but maybe that's one that's been mentioned earlier. I didn't see any traffic light for the trucks that will be crossing over 9W at that egress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christian Brunelli? Did you want this copy? Christian Brunelli?
Yep. Hello, my name is Christian Brunelli. I live at 101 Angola Road. I've been writing you a 20-page love letter, so I'm just going to go with the highlights here. First, on the SWIP. The first one is, as their own DIS says, the soil class for most of the site is soil class D, which means the runoff curve number is 94. When asphalt is 98, that tells you about the ability for infiltration, which is a big part of that. It says it has a seasonally high water table, which affects the ability capacity to absorb water on the site. So they propose raising the grade.
We're going to ask you to just slow down just a tiny bit.
Sure. And so what they're doing is going to raise the grade, which then has other impacts to.
Excuse me, your clock has stopped for 1 second. If you could speak into the mic directly, I know
Sure.
it's disconcerting sometimes, but our stenographer is having difficulty.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, we've added 10 seconds to your clock.
I'll try to use it well.
Thank you.
So what it does is that to accommodate their infiltration mitigation measures, they're going to raise the grade because they don't have it within the water table itself. All this leads to a lot of different issues that probably their assumptions aren't correct. What they use to determine the runoff is the standard TR55 equations, but that doesn't take into account the gradient, the high gradient on the Moodnup Bluffs, or let's say on the O&W embankment that's there. And that would make that soil that they're not paving similar to paved pavement. There's a few other things there where it's kind of like watching a bad Rubik's Cube player play where they get one side all red and they turn it over and they realize they messed up another face of the cube. So on one hand, they're promising these jobs, but in their traffic study, they say automation means we're going to have less cars on the road, meaning less people. So which one is it? And they do this with a lot of different parts where they might solve one problem on one part of their GIS, creating a problem in another one. On the traffic, just a summary. Their traffic study basically says that almost all of 9W would become a D, E, or F level of service, which is not appropriate for a next server suburban area. It's equivalent to an urban area level of service. There's some other issues with that. I used to be an EMS driver for New Windsor, and there's recent published research on this. The key way you would evacuate any call out of Cornwall on Hudson or Firthcliffe is along 9W. And when you're talking about 30 seconds waiting in traffic in the commute, it's different than, let's say, adding 30 seconds or a minute to a heart attack call to get to St. Luke's. And when you do that, when you add traffic lights or you add the level of traffic, that's going to impact that, and you should look at that. Lastly, if you look at some of the other warehouses in the area, including, let's say, the Treetops Fishkill properties. If you look at I Park Boulevard off 84, to where they've built a lot of different warehouses recently, the access road off 84 is 8 lanes, and then gets to 6 lanes to get to 4 lanes because of all that excess capacity, because that used to be the IBM campus. If you look at the ones in Montgomery, they're using the excess capacity of 747 that was built for the airport. And so their access road from 84 is to go through 28,000 people in the city of Newburgh, 28,000 people in New Windsor, and 12,000 in Cornwall. If you look at the access roads to the warehouse from the interstate in all those cases, you're maybe passing no more than maybe 10 or 50 people on the way from the interstate to the warehouse. And that's just simply not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we get your, I'm sorry, can we get your written stuff? Yeah, oh, she doesn't care. She translates really well. Pamela Hudson, I'm sorry, I forgot to, Pamela, and then Stephanie Joseph and Joseph Sandoli would be on deck.
Good evening. My name's Pamela Hudson, and I'm the ghost of Cornwall future. This whole development, it really breaks my heart. I loved my whole teaching career here. I was a teacher. I don't live in Cornwall, but I taught my whole career here. I taught in this building. I taught at the old high school. When folks would ask me where I taught, I would always answer, in the town that time forgot. And they'd say, which town is that? And I would say, Cornwall, New York. And their response was always a nod of agreement, followed by a comment about how beautiful Cornwall is. I live in Rockland County, and my town used to be a lot like Cornwall. Not anymore. I feel like in Rockland County and in Clarkstown right now, where they just built something just like that. And I gave my, my paper, I submitted it online, but I have to add that the huge warehouse project that they just built in my town had its first traffic fatality that was caused by the construction vehicles. And it's not even open yet. But anyway, in my town, it's basically Clarkstown is a cautionary tale. I follow a lot of land use issues and engage in them. I'm before my town planning board. They run the other way when they see me in the supermarket, so you know. I feel like my town is in end stage cancer in this kind of thing. And when I look at my planning board agenda each month, my stomach just drops, and I feel like I'm getting too old for this. But you know, from what I see on Facebook and from what I see of the people in here, I can see the community mobilizing, and I feel heartened. I'd like to attend all of these meetings, but I drove a really long way to get here tonight. And I can't really, I mean, I looked at I've looked at a lot of draft environmental impact statements. I just want to mention one. The one that was for the Palisades Mall. One of the promises was that they were going to mitigate the flooding. It was 1 week ago, our town supervisor is now begging the federal government to intervene because the main west-east route in Rockland County, Route 59, is regularly closed due to flooding. So that was their final environmental impact statement. There is one thing I've learned from all of my years of going in front of planning boards, ZBAs, you name it. It's that these developers that propose these totally inappropriate projects, they will not stop. They have deep pockets. We fought the one that just got built. They have deep pockets, a lot of fancy lawyers, and they promise leaders such as yourselves things that they will never deliver on. They keep hammering away until they get what they want. And then comes the next bad idea and the next bad idea. And it's like water trying to find that part of the roof that it can get in. But I want to encourage you to stay strong and just really look at this with a microscope, because it's no time at all before you're going to look back and remember the leak in the roof This is like my town, and your house is being swept down the river, and you will wonder how this could have happened to your town. I mean, our town. I consider this my town too, and this is how it happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Joseph, and this is my husband, Joseph Sandoli. Hi there, Treetop. I wanted you to see my face because I want you to know that we are real human beings at the end of this. So I myself, my husband, and my toddler, we live at 29 Knollcrest Court. If you look at your site map, that's right next to A3, which is the blast zone, just so you know. We would directly be impacted by the proposed Treetops project, as our home is on the site map A3, which is 50 feet from almost 100 loading docks. We are vehemently opposed to this project. My husband and I dreamed of having a home close to both our families, in the mountains with fresh, clean air, surrounded by nature, and a small town. We saved up for years, lived within our means, paid off student loans, and bought our dream home here in Cornwall at Stone Hollow in 2018. We even saved extra to pay for the premium lot in the cul-de-sac, the most affected area, by the way, of this. The home took longer than expected to be built due to the pandemic, so we moved in 2019, where we were anticipating our first child, and glad to have this home. It is not easy for us to divulge this following personal medical information, but in this instant, it's imperative that you do so you understand the gravity of the decision to be built here. Unfortunately, our daughter was born extremely premature, requiring a lengthy and difficult hospital stay. One thing that kept us going during those cold, long nights in the hospital was dreaming about the day we can bring her home to our clean, safe, quiet, family-friendly neighborhood where she'd grow up safely in this idyllic town. So you can understand our horror when we learned that our dream home would be within 50 feet of those loading docks, idling trucks, construction, noise, exhaust fumes, nuisance, chemicals, drainage issues, light and sound pollution, to name a few. By the time we arrived home, several neighbors had actually left for fear of this project, and I'm afraid several more will. Our daughter is immunocompromised with lung issues. She requires 24/7 oxygen. She has cardiac issues. Her health will be directly affected. I am a cancer survivor myself. My health will be directly affected. Several of our neighbors will be directly affected by this. My patients in this town and surrounding communities will be affected by this. I am a physician. I am tired of seeing environmental impacts on the health of our patients. It is no secret that living near or around factories is a direct assault to our nervous system, our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, and reproductive system, just to name a few. There are numerous studies by the NIH that you can Google that have shown dire effects of factory pollution, especially on at-risk and vulnerable populations like myself and my daughter. To allow the building of this type of facility is sending us the direct message that you do not care about us or our children, that you do not care about the health of our community or healthcare costs, that you do not care about the devastating environmental impacts this warehouse and the construction of it will cause to the habitat, fauna, and flora. We did not save up for years to buy our dream home in this quaint town to see it transformed in our very backyard. We do not want to be afraid of being outside. We do not want to see that several bird and other animal species to be destroyed. My daughter did not fight to survive, to come home and be locked indoors, so she does not breathe the fumes of trucks and factories within 50 feet of our house. We should not be afraid to drink water, grow a small garden with ground soil, or breathe in our backyard. So I ask the following questions. How do you plan to mitigate pollution in the water and soil? How do you plan to mitigate the truck traffic issues and access? How do you plan to mitigate the healthcare costs to patients as well as local clinics and hospitals that are already stretched to the brim? How do you plan to mitigate the air, especially small particulate, sound, sewage, litter, plastic, and noise pollution? How do you plan to mitigate the direct health effects of this to my family, to my neighbors, and my patients, especially respiratory, cardiovascular, neurologic, and reproductive? How do you plan to mitigate the potential damage to our property during construction and after? How do you plan to mitigate the nuisance of building this warehouse? How do you plan to mitigate the effects of changes to our solar access? How do you plan to mitigate the loss of privacy and preservation of our home and neighborhood? How do you plan to mitigate the general liability conditions of this massive building project? And how do you plan to mitigate the potential loss of property value, neighbors moving out, and young professionals leaving this area and community? We are imploring you to not allow this building of this massive factory warehouse literally in our backyard. I ask you not to put my family and community's life at risk. If the land must be used to build, please consider building something that would actually bring safety and health to our community, such as a park, recreation center, hiking trails, or nature preservatory. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I already submitted this.
And thank you, Stephanie. Mike Nielsen would be next. Mike Nielsen will be next, but I will ask again, I'm going to try to implement a little more firm adjudication, shall I say, on the 3-minute rule, because we do have a few more to get to, and everyone should have that opportunity. So I apologize in advance if it seems like rudely interrupting someone who's saying something relevant. It's all relevant, but we are getting it down, and we will consider everything's being said. That being said, Mike Nielsen, oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to break? That's an Army term for he has to go to the bathroom. With your indulgence, if we could take a, there will be 2 others. If anybody wants to go to the bathroom, go right ahead. If that's okay with everyone, is that okay with everyone? I will go through the list of individuals who will be in the next 4 in order so that we can move it along. We're not rushing you at all. Please, I'm sorry for this. There will be Mike Nielsen will be next, followed by Tim Bello and Christine Rupert. Josh, I think Josh already went. Where? Okay. That's off. Carla will be after that, Carla Castillo. Okay. So we have Tim Bello, I'm sorry, Mike Nielsen, Tim Bello, Christine Rupert, Carla Castillo, and then Katarina Dresses. Dressaris, I apologize. We'll give Led 4 minutes. You want to try it? Those new ones? Yeah. I will start at 9:15 sharp, and we will continue. If it is, I'm going to take it off. Yes. Yeah, now you hear. Yeah.
It was great meeting you. Yeah.
Person sitting next to me. That's Steve Jones. He's the head of the and he taught me all about retaining walls. Okay, just send me the list. This is what I can send the link.
Thank you.
Excuse my munching on a pretzel, that's our dinner. I believe on, if I might, I have to wait for Fran to get here. Okay. With that, at 9:16, we will. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth Ann. Okay, thanks. She's remarkable. Okay, with that, Mike Nielsen? In absentia, perhaps? Okay. I do not see Mike Nielsen. Okay. Tim Bello with Christine Rupert on deck. Tim Bello has abandoned us, I believe. Okay, Christine Rupert. On deck would be Carla Castillo.
I'm Christine Rupert, 103 Mountain Road in Cornwall-on-Hudson. Most of the project site that's being considered tonight is zone planned commercial development. The proposed development is not a commercial project, but it's really an industrial one, pure industrial. This DEIS amazingly and inaccurately describes the impacts on virtually every aspect of environmental concern as, quote, minimal. Nothing could be further from the truth. The impacts would be those severe impacts associated with industrial development. Commercial development, consistent with existing zoning, would involve more moderate construction and activity levels. Because of the disingenuous and defective conclusions reached by this DEIS, the planning board should exercise its discretion to deny the requested special permit. Similarly, the town board should refuse to change the zoning of the smaller portion of the site from HC to PCD. Note that the discussion of these zoning questions on page 33 is subtitled, quote, minor zoning map amendment, close quote. They are not fooling anyone by minimizing this issue. There is nothing minor about this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carla? Carla Castillo? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Carla Castillo. I'm a resident of the town of Cornwall, residing at 69 Hasbrook Avenue and serve as chair of the Cornwall Conservation Advisory Council. I'm presenting my minimal public comment because so many people have already said amazing, wonderful things tonight that I'm in full agreement with. As chair of the CAC, and I'm also submitting with this public comment as background the prior public comment that the CAC had presented at the Treetop project scoping session. The CAC's general position is that the DEIS does not adequately address our previously presented concerns. Furthermore, after reviewing the DEIS on a sampling of quality of life metrics, the CAC finds the applicant's analysis on mitigation measures to be extremely insufficient. For example, the DEIS ineffectively addresses protection of project site wetlands. The developer's proposed plan in effect destroys the habitat value of the wetlands by surrounding them with 45-foot plus structures and through exposure to light, noise, and other activity associated with industrial warehouses. Effective elimination of the wetlands also eliminates wetlands' natural ability to absorb stormwater and filter pollutants. And we all have already heard about how impervious the site already is, so those wetlands are even more important. The DEIS inadequately analyzes the air quality impacts from increased traffic and from the removal of almost 150 acres of forests. It identifies the negative emissions associated with tractor trailers, but it does not provide any kind of an analysis on the specific impact from the 1,000+ trucks and close to 2,000 passenger vehicles entering and exiting the project site on a weekly basis. No analysis is presented on the added carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, lead, ozone, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide that will result in reduced air quality for Cornwall and neighboring communities' residents. The DEIS on warehouses with no identified tenants is a thoroughly inadequate foundation for analysis. The town has absolutely no assurance that the project trip generation outlined in the traffic impact study will reflect any real-world scenario. The solar panel benefits that are mentioned cannot be assumed benefits, as no tenants have been identified and the appetite for solar panel installation is unknown. I strongly urge the planning board, and thank you for this hearing, and thank you for all the work and analysis that has been put into this project, to keep the public hearing open and extend the written comment period for 60 days. Folks are looking at over 2,000 pages of materials, and it is amazing for me to have heard how much analysis the general public has done here tonight, in addition to what, of course, the consultants have done. People need more time in order to really understand what could potentially be done to their community, and especially for a large development like this, which has been said, that will transform the very nature of the community that we so love. Thank you.
Carla, if we could have a copy of of your right, could we have that? We're stealing everybody's narratives, but thank you. Katerina? I think it's Katerina. Katerina Dressman? No? Dresaris? Yes, no? No. Okay. Pat Smith? I feel abandoned. Andrea Demedio? Chris Demedio? Brendan Coyne. I know Brendan's here. There you are. And after Brendan, we have, hold on, Aaron Seliquini. Aaron Seliquini.
Good evening, I'm Brendan Coyne, 13 Paula Court, Cornwall and Hudson, former mayor of the village, former president of the school board, and currently 4th of July co-chair. There are some people who have already left who are scheduled to speak, and you can see that's happening, and I don't blame them. I guess it's getting late. So we're fortunate in Cornwall to have a high quality of life. And it starts with our attachment to the environment, which gives us a sense of place. We are a river town and derive much of our identity from the Hudson River. We enjoy boating through the Cornwall and Hudson Boat Launch and the Cornwall Yacht Club and kayaking. We celebrate life on the river with picnics, parties, and other gatherings. We celebrate the river itself annually through Riverfest. We enjoy the beauty of the Moona Creek as it winds through the town. And I'll make a remark here. The Moona Creek, folks, it has a very long name. Just so the Moona Council will be submitting a letter tomorrow. Unfortunately, Simon Gruber, the chair, had to leave tonight. Storm King Mountain provides majestic views from many perspectives, including the hiking trails in Storm King State Park. When Consolidated Edison proposed building a hydro plant on Storm King, Cornwall residents, as we're doing tonight, with support from folks around the country, fought for nearly 2 decades and saved the mountain in the battle for Storm King. And that started the modern environmental movement and led to the creation of Scenic Hudson, which was here tonight. They advocate for the climate and environmental justice. Cornwall belongs to the Orange County Land Trust and the Hudson Highlands Land Trust. And Carla was just here from the Cornwall Conservation Advisory Council. We practically have an agency or organization for every 1,000 people who live in Cornwall. We are stewards of the environment. That's what we're known for. And this would obliterate that. It's ridiculous that this has even come this far. And I haven't mentioned everything that I wanted to mention. I do feel that, and I said this last night at the town board, we need to sit down with the owner of the property. I understand frustration, but there's been, lots of things suggested for this property and turned down. Let's get together and find something that's viable, something that will talk to what we are, our character. This is not who we are. This project cannot go forward as it's presently submitted. I thank you all for your tough work. I've been in your seat, not in terms of a planning board, but in other areas, trying to represent this wonderful community. I'd like to just acknowledge before I leave John Lucas, who spoke earlier tonight, who really got things started, and I appreciate that, John, so much. All right. We are stewards, and we want to remain so. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Alan Selaquini and Maria Ebling will be on deck. Is Maria here? Maria's not here. Right, Aaron?
Good evening. My name is Aaron Selaquini. I'm a resident of 39 Rowe Avenue. Like many others here tonight, I am requesting an extension of the public comment period to 60 days. This proposal would be the largest industrial development in Cornwall's history. The planning board, the town board, and Cornwall residents all have a responsibility to consider how a project of this size and scope will impact the quality of life and future character of the town. Treetop has over 300 employees and has engaged the services of several consulting firms to strategize and plan for this project. They took well over a year to produce this draft environmental impact statement, and the public needs time to thoroughly review it to the best of our ability. We also need time for experts and other knowledgeable stakeholders to help us understand what is on the table and the ramifications for our future in Cornwall. To that point, I appreciate all of the consultants' comments this evening, and instead of apologizing for providing details, I ask you to please provide more details. We need them and value them. I also encourage the planning board to make public the consultants' evaluations and not ask them to remain silent. It is hard to imagine how something this outsized could fit into our town without breaking it, but at the very least, we have the right to know the real implications based on actual data and the feasibility of mitigation strategies for the inevitable harm to the environment and our health. Please extend this public comment period to 60 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Maria Ebling? Maria here? She is not. Jonna Dahl? And on deck, Lisa DiCarlo? Oh, I'm sorry, Julia Dahl. I apologize.
Hi, my name's Julia Dahl. I'm a resident of Cornwall and Hudson. So there are three main reasons people move to Cornwall and remain in Cornwall. It's beautiful, it's safe, and for the most part, our property values remain good or go up. This project dramatically undermines all those characteristics. It will change our town forever. So I'd like to point out two main concerns. First, the DES that the applicant gave, conservatively estimates, and this is conservative, that the project will add at least 700 more cars and trucks, 700 to our town's roads every day. It's almost unimaginable, but we have to imagine what that actually looks like, right? We have to imagine that, again, by the admittedly conservative estimate of a company whose interest it is to make it look good, that we have to imagine 60 new tractor trailers barreling over the mountain, through Vales Gate, down 300 every day. Talk about hazardous, talk about inconvenient, talk about incongruous, right? Concerningly, perhaps most concerningly, I'm sort of surprised nobody's said this yet. For those of us who live in Cornwall, people who live like in Laurel Crest and in Knoll Crest, Those cars and trucks barreling through the center of our town in 9W, they're going to be on Main Street, they're going to be on Willow. Every day, our kids ride their bikes and walk across 9W to get to the middle school, to get to Willow Ave, going from their friend's house. Who will be responsible when the first kid gets hit? Because that's going to happen. The people responsible would be the people who created and the people who allowed this completely unnecessary risk to enter our lives. Second, flooding. I'm not going to waste time asking for a show of hands of all the people whose homes have flooded in the more severe and will continue to get more severe weather. But anyone who lives here knows the number is growing. The applicant has not adequately addressed how taking away almost 2 million square feet of forest, which absorbs water, and replacing it with 2 million square feet of concrete, which does exactly the opposite, will impact our homes and our safety. So in closing, I'd like to say that I would like to ask that the board hire independent consultants whose firms are not investors in the Orange County partnership. That is the one entity with which this organization seems to be most cozy with. I'd like to see people not connected to that partnership, which the Senator Skoufis spoke about. I'd also like to please ask that the board remain skeptical. The applicant can promise all kinds of mitigations, but if you remember what happened with our golf course, you might remember that those mitigations mean nothing. The developer does not have to follow through. Once those trees are gone, they're gone. They're never coming back. You have to understand that the promises are probably going to be broken. You really have to allow for that. So finally, once the trees are gone, they're gone. You have the power, quite literally, to save the beauty and safety of Cornwall or destroy it. Please use that power wisely.
Thank you, Julia. Elisa DiCarlo. This is Lisa DiCarlo.
Hi, my name is Lisa DiCarlo. I live at 23 Harris Lane. I'm a critical care nurse and a holistic health nurse for the past 28 years. I am requesting that the public comment period be open for 60 days because I don't think that there's adequate time to review everything that we need to review and all the information and to just do more research. But I'm really, really concerned about the public health threat to our community and to the surrounding communities that this development project will cause. I think it will bring irreparable harm to us physically, psychologically, and emotionally, including cardiovascular diseases, cancers, stress, respiratory diseases, neurological impacts to our children. This is so close to schools. It's close to all of our recreation areas and our activities that are vital to our health and well-being, our quality of life, our drinking water. And I could go on, but I think you understand that this is really a grave threat. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Etheridge.
Hi, my name is Kristen Deathridge, 105 Russell Street. My family was here with me, but they needed to go to bed. So we strongly oppose the Treetop Warehouse project. As a lifelong Hudson Valley resident, my family and I moved to Cornwall in 2019, captivated by its loving small town feel and ultimately invested in a home in 2021. This proposed warehouse would just be a neighborhood away from our home, and it threatens our peace with the anticipated noise, light pollution, and traffic disruptions. This parcel is more than just a space. As designated by the Orange County Department of Planning in 2018, it's a sanctuary for rare animals, areas of known importance. It is a crucial stepping stone forest, according to Forest Patches, an important historic site based on student researchers and their Cornwall Scenic Resource Inventory in 2017, and is a vital part of the Modena Creek corridor based on the 2019 Cornwall Natural Heritage Project. These irreplaceable features contribute to Cornwall's unique identity. Approving this project would not only shatter the tranquility we sought for, but it will irreparably damage the ecological and historical richness that defines Cornwall. I implore you, please, to consider the long-lasting consequences both on the residents and the invaluable nature and historic treasures that make Cornwall exceptional. Let's preserve our town's essence and protect the sanctity of this irreplaceable parcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Lisa Daly? Lisa Daly is not here. Joe Laverdi? Okay, thank you. Oh my goodness. Samuel is an attorney. I get the ESQ on the end there.
It's Samuel Gennon, 22 Laurel Avenue. So
could you say that again, please? I'm sorry.
Samuel Gennon, 22 Laurel Avenue.
Could you spell your last name? No,
G-E-N-E-N.
Right, like a doctor, not a lawyer.
What?
You're right, like a doctor, not a lawyer.
I apologize.
Could you spell that last name?
G-E-N-E-N.
G-E-N-E-N. Got it, thanks.
I have 3 submissions. The first being, I have done my best, my utmost, to review the documents. And I, despite in a previous life being someone who could review tens of thousands of documents in a very short period of time, I have been unable to really have a thorough conclusion. So if I am unable to make that thorough conclusion, what hope does a reasonable person without that skill have? So with that, I would respectfully submit that the board extend the period by a further 30 days. The second submission that I have is, in reviewing those documents, I looked for deficiencies. There have already been a number of deficiencies identified by Ms. O'Donnell as well as Dr. Greenlee. Those specific deficiencies, as I looked at, I just wish to hone in on 2 particular matters. The first being is when the data collection took place for the relevant traffic information by the treetops data analysis. That's one thing. The second being the overall environmental impact assessment for the roadworks themselves. So there's a paucity of information in respect of the air quality, which I don't believe has been thoroughly exhausted. And that really does lead me on very neatly to my third submission, which is, in the absence of a thorough, full ability to analyze this information, it is, of course, for your attorney to advise you, but it must be that this board take all relevant considerations into account, and failing to take those into account does cause a significant number of problems for the community at large. So I am most grateful for your consideration and your very thorough analysis of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Andrew Koudlay. Okay, Andrew Kudlai. Andrew Kudlai. Oh, I got it right. A neighbor.
Hello, my name is Andrew Kudlai. I live at 334 Angola Road. And normally I find myself here speaking on behalf of an owner on projects like this or larger in places like New York City, New Mexico, all over the country, large complex projects. I'm an architect and I'm usually the lead designer on large projects such as this. And as an architect, when you review a proposal, right, you're not evaluating it. You're not looking for deficiencies like the previous speaker had stated. You're looking for solutions. And it's hard to imagine viable solutions based on my experience on these types of projects, the way that this is planned. I think all of these issues have been highlighted by speakers before me. I think that I don't want to waste my time repeating those issues, but one thing that stood out to me very clearly here is the absence, or perhaps I didn't see it because it is a very lengthy document, which I have not had time to review in full, but the absence of an evaluation based on chemical quantities and allowable limits in these buildings. Now, I understand that a proposed occupant is not defined. Usually this is due to an NDA. I understand that. But in my experience, every single project I've ever worked on of this size and even smaller has an occupant in mind with an NDA signed, and for that reason, they can't be disclosed. And I get it. Coming back to the chemical quantities limits, there are strict chemical quantities limits for every fire compartment within a building, for all buildings. This is especially true in warehouse, storage, laboratory, and other high-risk buildings. Now, when most people think of this, they think of, I don't know, hydrochloric acid, something crazy. And those quantities are tiny of what you're allowed to keep in a warehouse or in one fire compartment. But these also include things like liquor, rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, sawdust, a lot of other, what you would typically understand as safe everyday substances that are limited in quantity, that are allowed to be stored in one fire compartment. And even if there was no anticipated occupant here, there should and has to be occupant's manual for operations that lists what can be stored based on the design of these structures. And that should be reviewed prior to approval. This is my experience with every project I have ever worked on. I've worked on some laboratories where this is literally step one. You don't design the building without looking at the chemical quantities and the requirements of your occupants. You don't even look at it. I didn't see anything of this nature. If it's there, I'd love to take a look at it. And I don't want to take too much time here, but sorry, I lost my train of thought. I don't want to take up too much time here since I didn't prepare a written statement. But all that being said, the impacts of this can't be understated. Something you can buy from Amazon, you, I, anyone else here, is, for example, an herbicide. My 4-acre property can be treated with 2 ounces of that herbicide. Totally legal to do. You can buy it now. You buy it in jugs, sometimes 64 ounces, bigger, etc. And they come from Amazon warehouses. 2 ounces treats 4 acres. You use 3 ounces, it kills all your grass. These potentially can be stored in pallets and storage facilities by the hundreds of gallons. One of these packs in a flood condition or anything else would destroy the Moodna Creek. That's not an understatement. And that's one product that could be stored here. So I can't understate the importance of evaluating all the chemical quantities and permissible by law I'm not saying we go above and beyond. I say we do the bare minimum. So I implore you to look for this information and evaluate it based on your professional judgment.
Excellent points, and thank you very much for your presentation. Colin Coyne? Colin Coyne? And Patricia Spalding would be on deck, and Paul Janis would be after that.
Good evening. Colin Coyne, Angola Road. First thing I'd like to say is thank you. All of you up there providing a real public service tonight. Your efforts are appreciated, and hopefully we have a favorable outcome. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you, or the second thing, thank you for extending the public comment period to 30 days. I, however, am hopeful that that can be extended to 60 days. It's a very large document, and most of us are working full-time jobs with other obligations. It's not a reasonable time frame for most of us to get through that. I think 60 days would be more appropriate. My next point regarding flooding that's been mentioned many times tonight, this is not just some hypothetical flooding. In the last month, roads have been closed in the town and the village due to Munda Marsh flooding. At least twice, maybe 3 times in the last month, and several times in the last year. It's happening now. To increase the likelihood of that, I think would be poor planning. My next point, I don't believe that the DEIS addresses PM 2.5, which is particulate matter 2.5 microns. It is very small particles that is very well researched and very well understood to cause numerous respiratory illnesses. These particles are found in diesel emissions from the several hundred trucks that we will see on a daily basis for the rest of our time in Cornwall, should this be approved. I think that the DEIS should speak to PM 2.5, and we should have an idea of just what this would do in that regard. I don't believe it addresses that. Surely, if this project were to be approved, this would lead to an increase in respiratory disease for our community members. It's real, it's the people in this room. My next point, I'm a small business owner. I own Storm King Adventure Tours in Cornwall and Hudson. We do guided kayaking tours on the Hudson River. One of the places that we visit is the Munda Marsh. We go back there to observe the wildlife. We see bald eagles, osprey, heron, egrets, the list goes on. We go back there for peace and quiet. It's how I make a living. It's also how I enjoy my life here in Cornwall. Should this project be approved, I think I would have to stop offering tours to Munda Marsh. If we have even a few hundred trucks going northbound over 9W, the noise pollution, I mean, no matter what the DEI says, the noise pollution in the marsh will be too loud. If the birds are still there, if it hasn't chased away the eagles and the other birds, we won't be able to hear them. I know this now from rush hour, it gets loud enough. I can't plan tours around rush hour. So we have to be careful about building these, any structure that's going to permanently alter the state of our community. I think something that's nice about Cornwall is that we have locals who own businesses in town, who employ community members and take our neighbors out and enjoy the space we have. A project like this, we would be taking a major step away from that. And my last thing I'd like to say tonight is that 2 years ago, when this project when I first heard of it, there was an informational session held at Munger Cottage. And I think word didn't get out about it quite enough, and nobody showed up but the developers and myself. And it ended up being a very casual conversation. And I think that they let their smoke screen down for a moment when we were speaking. And I asked them, What becomes of this warehouse when it becomes obsolete, like the American Shopping Mall has? What are we going to do with this property in that building? And he said to me, it won't be my problem. I will be on an island somewhere. And that statement, you know, he was answering the question, what happens when it's obsolete? The reality is that isn't just their attitude when it becomes obsolete. That will become their attitude the moment that they are given permission to break ground. Right now, they may be smiley and happy to answer questions and revise the DEIS. The moment they're given permission, we will see their true character. They will be poor neighbors and poor community members. So I ask you, please protect our community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Patricia Spalding. And Paul Janice would be up. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Spalding. I'm actually a resident of New Windsor, but I grew up in Cornwall. We moved here in 1977, and I lived in Laurel Crest. And when we moved there, they said, "This is the last development in Cornwall." We bought the property. Obviously, that was not the case. I was hoping that the map would still be up. I'm just curious if on the map that they could add the gas line that wraps around this property. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but this week, Cornwall averted a huge natural disaster. Because of erosion and the rain, the Central Hudson gas line down by First Cliff was completely exposed. Maybe 20, 30 feet of gas line was exposed. It was just dangling midair. This property along that is the same gas line. You go add in concrete, pavement, blah, 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 we're going to have the same issue. Please look into this gas line. If this had erupted or cracked or something else, that would have all been in the Moodna. Same thing with this property. It's right there. The gas line is right there. Please take this into huge consideration. Secondly, is I haven't heard anything, but your neighbors in New Windsor, their drinking water, we have the wells right there at Butter Hill. Please take that into consideration. And last, the Moona Creek was previously called Murderer's Creek, given that a family many moons ago was murdered there by the Native Americans. Native Americans occupied this particular piece of property many years ago, and there could potentially be artifacts still on that property. We don't know. Once you start digging, there may be something dug up that hasn't been accounted for. Is there a plan in place for that type of situation if property of Native Americans is dug up? I'd like to understand that as well. And I think tonight's meeting has been wonderful. Everybody's contributed so many different things to this meeting, very eye-opening. But I think it comes down to 3 words: love thy neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Paul?
Good evening, Paul Janis, 46 Deer Hill in the Village. I've heard amazing things here tonight. Thank you all, as everybody said. And a lot of the comments, which, as I say, have all been incredible, very, very important. They center on problems with the DEIS and ask the treetop to create solutions to these questions. And I think the thing, and I heard a little bit of what I want to say at the end, and so I think that the Mayor Coyne said, I think it's important to say that even if you were to answer all these questions, even if you were to solve all the problems, which I don't see happening, but if you could, I think that it's important for you to understand that it's just a terrible fit. That the town is not this place that you want it to be. It's a bucolic place. It's a beautiful place. It's an old place. It's an ancient place. And one of our secrets, I wrote a letter to the planning board. One of our secrets is one of its failings. And the failing is that we have horrible road network here. You can't get anywhere easily from Cornwall. We're nowhere near a bridge. We're nowhere near the highway interstate system. It's impossible. The roads are small. The terrain is hilly. We've got Storm King Mountain penning us in here. Everything I just named is actually a positive for this place because it's so beautiful. It's what it is. It's Cornwall. But the idea of putting a hub for transportation that depends on ease of flow, access, it's an upside down idea. So what I add is that if you could solve all the questions that the locals, that the people that are immediately affected by this build, and their lives are changed and destroyed immediately. Nobody bought into this town to live next to a warehouse. So that's obvious. So you fix that, you buy all their properties, all those people go away. And I'm not suggesting you could, and I'm not suggesting you would, but I'm saying that if you did, your idea still doesn't hold water. This is not what this place is. We are not a transportation hub. We have much bigger things in front of us in terms of opportunities and our possibilities. So I'd like to close. There's a document that we found that I submitted today in another letter, a second letter, called the Cornwall Scenic Resources Inventory Report. It was a report made by a college, by Cornell, and they talk about very, very important things. And it's very interesting. If I'm reading that report correctly, this property is actually mentioned in it as one of the properties to actually protect. So you'll find that in my letter. There's a PDF attached, but there's a closing in that I thought was phenomenal, and it's this. It says, quote, "The first known town meeting in Cornwall was in 1765. Over the next 100 years, Cornwall developed a reputation as a summer resort and health retreat destination due to its scenic beauty and accessibility to New York City by steamboat and train. By the 20th century, the area was known for its outdoor recreational activities like hunting, fishing, swimming, biking, and Cornwall's draw for this lifestyle remains an important part of the town's economic attractiveness." So I think that, yeah, this is who we are, and what you are proposing is who we're not. It's a square peg in a round hole. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any other Cornwall residents or otherwise present who would wish to comment? Seeing none. Oh, there is one. Oh, there's a hand. You don't have to run. It's okay.
Hi, I'm Robert Sanchez. I'm a commercial real estate salesperson. I live on Mailer Avenue. We moved here from the 9/11 hazard zone. We found a place where our 3- and 5-year-old could grow up. I just want to read really quickly. In the neighborhoods around us, in the last 7 days, these are accidents only involving large trucks. Route 17, a tractor-trailer rollover. Route 17A, a snowplow accident. Orange Avenue, an ambulance involved in an accident. On the thruway, 2 trucks, one of them a tanker. In Florida, a child was killed by a bus today. In Chester, a bus and a truck accident. And on 9 West, a jackknife tractor-trailer. That's in the last 7 days. This is not a safe place for major transportation. It's hard enough to walk my 3- and 5-year-old across the street on Mailer Avenue to school in the morning. This is not the place for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there other members of the public wishing to comment? Seeing none. Yes, I'll ask for a motion to close the public portion of the meeting. Second? All in favor? Unanimous. Oh, you're right. I announced the Closing of the public hearing. Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for attending, and thank you, police, for being here. This is an unruly crowd, and we needed all your help. Oh, please, everyone here, while you're here at the present time, if there are written comments, they are right now due by February 16th.